Chapter 575. In addition, Su Jiao's filthy and stinky body carried her over. The stench assailed the nostrils as soon as she opened her mouth, and old madam almost fainted from nausea. Xiaoyin wanted to go up and help old madam up, but Su Jiao forcefully brushed her aside. She hugged old madam tightly and refused to let go, as if she had caught a life-saving straw. Su Jiao hugged old madam tightly and glared at everyone like a tiger eyeing its prey. Old madam had lived like a princess these past few years. Now that Su Jiao was strangling her with a stinky body, old madam was about to be strangled to death. Mother! Your son is unfilial. You took so long to find mother. Qiao Zhongheng rushed over and knelt in front of his mother to cry. When old madam saw her son's shriveled appearance, grief welled up from her heart. She reached out to hold Qiao Zhongheng's hands as tears streamed down her face. Xiaolong, hurry up and greet grandmother. Kowtow to grandmother, Su Jiao berated her son. Xiaolong hurriedly went up and cried, Grandmother. The family of three gathered around old madam and cried fiercely. Old madam didn't despise Xiaolong for being filthy. Looking at her plump grandson who had become as thin as a shriveled green bean, her heart ached so much that she almost fainted. When this large family rushed in, Arbor had already ordered people to close the main door. Although there weren't many people on Minshan Avenue, no one in the Qiao estate was willing to perform a drama with the main door open. Great! Now that the three generations had performed a great show together, it was Granny Niu who impatiently kicked Su Jiao's leg from the side, which made Su Jiao, who was still weeping bitterly, come back to her senses. Mother, how have you been these years? Su Jiao pretended to wipe her tears as she stole a glance at her sisters-in-law sitting on the side. The moment he saw this, he was immediately filled with anger. Wei Ziqin's face was fair and delicate, with only a few faint wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. She wore a lotus-colored jacket embroidered with peonies, paired with a flower-sprinkled pleated skirt of the same color. She looked like a rich and noble person. The most hateful thing was that Wei Ziqin had been sitting there without batting an eyelid from the beginning until now. No matter how Qiao Zhongheng's family of three kicked up a fuss, she didn't say a word for a long time. This behavior infuriated Su Jiao into gnashing her teeth. In the past, when she was at home, she was the most popular in front of the old lady. In terms of food and clothing, how could Wei Ziqin compare with her? But now, her family of three was like beggars begging on the streets, while Wei Ziqin had been gloriously promoted to the Grand Marquise Estate's madam. She was dressed in silks and satins, and she was also eating exotic delicacies. This disparity was so great that it made Su Jiao's entire heart twitch fiercely. The son is unfilial and the daughter-in-law is not virtuous. When the old lady heard her youngest daughter-in-law's question, she immediately cried again. Qiao Zhongbang seemed to be energized as he sprang to his feet and immediately reprimanded Qiao Zhongbang. Eldest brother, how can you be so unfilial? Look at how angry mother is. Have you taken good care of mother all these years? I told you that mother can't do without me to take care of her. Su Jiao squeezed out 2 drops of tears and said bitterly, Mother, how about letting your daughter-in-law and eldest grandson take care of you in the future? Okay. Elderly lady repeatedly agreed. But will eldest brother and the others welcome us? Su Jiao deliberately asked, and the corner of her eye twitched as she instigated Wei Ziqin with a glance. He dares not to welcome us. Elderly lady immediately roared with vigor, we're all brothers of the same family, blood-related brothers who won't leave even if they're beaten to death. If he can bear to part with that face, he'll chase you all out along with this old lady. Chapter 576. Wei Ziqin felt as if she had swallowed a fly. All these years, she had attended to this old woman in the morning and at night. Every time old madam was sick or in pain, she would stay by her bedside to take care of her, but she had never received a word of praise. Now, she was constantly saying that her son was unfilial and her daughter-in-law was unvirtuous. She was so aggrieved that her eyes reddened. This old woman didn't ask anything and just made the decision to let Xiao Zhongheng's family of 3 move in. Arbor sat next to his mother and held her hand as he gazed at her comfortingly. He said softly, "Mom, don't worry, I won't give them the chance to get involved." Wei Ziqin immediately patted her daughter. Although her eyes were red, her voice was resolute. "Don't worry about this matter. Mom won't let them get what they want." She was now a legitimate third-rank marchioness personally conferred by the present emperor and had the title of noble lady. It was absolutely impossible for Su Jiao to bully her and use her as a stepping stone like before. Besides, she wasn't stupid. Looking at today's situation, not only was Su Jiao's family delusional about moving into the Marquis' estate, even Granny Nyo's family, who had nothing to do with them, wanted to move in and reap benefits. How could she allow these rat droppings to come in and cause a great disturbance in the Chao estate? Since Mom said so, Arbor continued to sit and ignore the matter. He only rummaged through his storage talisman and took out an item, slapping it on the small table. Elderly lady turned her head when she heard the sound. When she saw the red paper on the table, she thought of something, and her eyelids suddenly twitched. As the mistress of the Marquis' estate, Wei Ziqin had already walked up and gazed coldly at Su Jiao, who was putting on a good show. "Third sister-in-law, don't drag old madam into acting. No matter what you say, your family of 3, along with Granny Nyo's family, can't move into the Marquis' estate. This is an estate bestowed by the present emperor, and not just anyone can live in it. You..." Su Jiao had already aged quite a bit from being exposed to the elements, and her face was even darker from anger now. She vigorously shook old madam's hand that was supporting her. "Mother-in-law, look at what eldest sister-in-law is saying. She clearly doesn't want to acknowledge us as her relatives." Granny Qiao immediately trembled in anger. She turned around and pointed at Wei Ziqin as she cursed, "Vicious woman. Where do you want to send my son and grandson? You vicious woman. Do you believe that I will immediately ask Zhongbang to divorce you?" The head maidservant by Wei Ziqin's side, Chunying, was so angry that her face turned red. She had seen how Madame treated old Madame all these years. It was a good thing to be considerate. Which family's daughter-in-law could do this? Even a lowly servant like her couldn't stand it anymore. Old Madam, she was really an ingrate. Arbor coldly glanced at Xiao Zhongheng's family, who were jumping up and down. He picked up the piece of paper and walked to Old Madam's side. He supported his mother and said, "Old Madam, don't tell them that my mother is now a third-rank noble lady. She's also not someone that can be divorced just because some random person says so. I really don't believe what you're saying. Moreover, the family division document is written clearly. Do you want to look through it again and recall it?" Old Madame Qiao was so infuriated by Arbor's eccentric tone that she fell backwards on the spot. Su Jiao made a big fuss as she supported Old Madame. She turned her head and angrily rebuked Arbor, "Eldest young miss, is it? After not seeing you for a few years, your words have become even sharper and more unkind. There's no place for you to speak when the elders are talking here." Chapter 577. Arbor coldly glanced at Su Jiao, and a faint disdain surfaced on her stoic face. "With my current status, I'm sorry, but I really do have a place to talk." She suddenly wanted to ruthlessly bully others. What should she do? It wasn't good to bully others. But facing these greedy and hypocritical faces, she really didn't want to continue enduring. Why should she let her mother suffer in front of these people? Could it be that if they endured, these people would be willing to let their family off? Su Jiao's expression abruptly changed. On the side, Qiao Long couldn't take it anymore and roared, "You little bitch, you dare to speak to my mother like this?" He rushed up and aimed a slap at Arbor's small face. In the past, Qiao Long was the entire family's ancestor. Who dared to throw a tantrum at him? Now that he entered the eldest branch's marquis's estate and saw that the eldest branch's family, who could only wear cotton clothes and live in a rundown house, were all well-fed and well-fed, he truly felt extremely unbalanced. In front of grandmother, he, Qiao Long, was the greatest ancestor. Even if he slapped this eldest cousin sister, she could only swallow her teeth and blood. However, her hand hadn't even touched a strand of Arbor's hair when her face suffered a heavy slap. Impudent! Mo Lien flashed to Arbor's side and pulled her into his embrace. He bellowed angrily, his expression abnormally furious. He really didn't know that when Qiao Qiao was in the village, she was bullied like this. This half-grown brat dared to lay a hand on his Jojo at this time. It was evident that he was used to being unruly at home and being violent. He truly had a lot of guts. Immediately afterwards, the main door abruptly opened, and several dozen guards armed with sabers and swords rushed in. They surrounded Granny Nyo's family and Qiao Zhongheng's family of 3, and their sabers and swords flickered as they uniformly pointed their sharp points at the deathly pale Qiao Zhongheng and company. Qiao Zhongheng and company all looked emaciated and bewildered, but under the direction of so many sabers and swords, they could only raise their hands in surrender. He Tian led his troops to kneel and salute with a solemn expression. This subordinate greets the crown prince and crown princess. This subordinate failed to protect his master. The crown princess was shocked. "Please punish me, crown princess." Arbor shook his head and motioned for him to get up. The eyelids of Qiao Zhongheng and the others twitched violently. They all wore dumbfounded expressions as they stared blankly at Prince Mo and their eldest niece, who were surrounded by people. Crown Prince. Crown Princess. What was going on? After they entered the city, they were like headless flies, trying to find out the whereabouts of the Qiao estate. However, they couldn't tell them clearly. The person who gave them directions didn't have good intentions either. He directly pointed them to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate and said that it was the largest Qiao estate in the city. That person saw that they were dressed in rags and looked like beggars. In fact, he was just joking with them and deliberately wanted to brush them off. Who would have thought that he would really point them in the right direction? When he saw that Qiao Zhongheng's family of 3 were really relatives of the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, the person who had been leading the way to watch a good show was so scared that his legs turned to jelly, and he had long since slipped away. Qiao Zhongheng and company went straight to the Qiao estate as soon as they arrived, so they didn't find out what was going on at all. They only knew that his older brother had been promoted and made a fortune, silently becoming a marquis. Qiao Zhongheng was very envious and thought that he had to bring his wife and children to live in the marquis's estate no matter what. No matter what, he had to cling to his big brother. When the time came, he might even be able to become an official. Now that the situation had suddenly changed, Qiao Zhongheng's family was scared out of their wits. Chapter 578. He Tian's furious shout was heard. A bunch of unruly commoners. Why aren't you paying your respects to the crown prince and crown princess when you see her? The family, including Granny Nyo's family, hastily knelt down and trembled like quails, not daring to make a fuss. The entire estate immediately fell silent. Qiao Long was enraged, and just as he opened his mouth to curse, "Bitch," Mo Lien's icy gaze swept over, her pair of phoenix eyes exuding a baleful aura. "Slap him. Dee don't. He's a child. A child is insensible and speaks without thinking, please forgive him, your highness the crown prince." Seeing a eunuch walking over with a wide mahogany board, Su Jiao was scared out of her wits and hastily went up to protect her son. Speaking without thinking at such an age, that's your lack of upbringing as parents. Let him go. Mo Lien coldly said, punish him with 10 boards. Remember this in the future. Su Jiao howled and wanted to pounce forward, but she was immediately dragged away by 2 vicious soldiers. She screamed with reddened eyes as she watched Xiao Long being dragged away by a soldier to the side. The eunuch used the wide board to slap her son's mouth repeatedly. Xiao Long had never suffered such humiliation in his life. His mouth was hit again and again, and after the 10 slaps, one of his teeth fell out. He roared with a mouth full of blood, you little bitch, you really dared to hit me. Who do you think you are, you? You dared to treat me like this in front of grandmother. If I knew earlier, I would have strangled you to death back then. Su Jiao was so scared that her face was drained of color, and she frantically crawled towards her son while shrieking, Xiao Long, shut up, shut up. Overwhelming fury surged in Mo Lien's eyes, and she raised her hand to shout angrily, what are you still standing there for? You refused to mend your ways and spoke rudely against the crown princess. Drag them out and beat them to death. The Marquis of Jiayuan's estate instantly quieted down. However, that silence only lasted for a split second before it was immediately filled with Su Jiao's piercing wails. No. No. Su Jiao scrambled in front of Mo Lien and Arbor. She knelt and kowtowed, Your Highness, please spare my life. Your Highness, please spare my life. When a child speaks without a filter, it is the foolish woman who has not been properly educated. When I return, I will definitely punish him severely and properly educate him. Your Highness, please spare his life. She looked up and saw Prince Mo pursing his lips and not saying a word. She quickly rolled over to Arbor, wanting to hug his leg. Niece, miss, no, Crown Princess, Your Highness the Crown Princess. I beg you to spare your younger brother's life for the sake of the Qiao family's old master, who shares the same origin. I beg you, Crown Princess, Crown Princess. Arbor's face was cold. Mo Lien looked down at her and rubbed her head. She waved her hand impatiently and said, drag her out. 2 soldiers immediately dragged Xiao Long to the front yard. Su Jiao's vision darkened, and she repeatedly begged for mercy, her head banging against the ground. Granny Nyo and company were so frightened that they couldn't make a sound. The young lady kneeling behind Granny Nyo was around 15 or 16 years old. She secretly looked up at the enraged crown prince with an intoxicated expression. Was this the current crown prince? He was so young and handsome, and he also had so much power and influence. Wei Mingli's maiden heart thumped wildly, and she was practically unable to shift her gaze away. Look, such a hoodlum and scoundrel eldest brother Wei's family could only kneel in front of His Highness the Crown Prince, not daring to utter a single word. Madame Nei's son, who was kneeling next to Wei Mingli, quickly tugged at her daughter and had her quickly lower her head. Chapter 579. Madame Nei's son was timid. In front of the Crown Prince, she was alarmed and scared when she saw her daughter staring at that person's face without any etiquette. She was also worried that her daughter would be ignorant and cause trouble, so she quickly tugged at her to make her bow her head. Of her 3 daughters, 2 had starved to death, so she only had this one daughter left. Second young Master Wei had also died of illness 2 years ago, so the mother and daughter had to rely on the eldest branch to survive. They had already lived in fear and trepidation, so she didn't want to cause any more trouble now. How could she have known that a young girl's yearning for love was actually fantasizing about the Crown Prince at this very moment? Wei Mingli completely ignored Madame Nei's son's reminder as she stared fixedly at the Crown Prince. Her gaze was too sharp, so Arbor immediately looked over vigilantly. His cold and clear eyes swept over Wei Mingli as he said in displeasure, "Why do you keep staring at me?" Everyone. The Crown Prince's pursed lips turned up slightly. For some reason, he suddenly recalled coitus sex chi mei, or a sorry state back then that his darling was as funny as ever. She always felt that the other girls' gazes were on her. Madame Ney's son was so terrified that she immediately pressed her daughter's head down. With a bang, Wei Mingli was forced to kowtow. Her eyes were filled with indignation and resentment as she forcefully pushed Madame Ney's son's hand away. She felt that Madame Ney's son was incompetent and made her lose face in front of everyone. She didn't even raise her head as she tightly clutched her skirt with both hands and bit her lip. Arbor felt bored and turned to look at Qiao Long, who had already been dragged to the front door. He saw that Qiao Long's hands were clinging tightly to the door, and he also knew fear now. His cries shook the heavens as he begged for mercy. Old Madame also didn't have the energy to make a fuss at this moment. She collapsed on the ground and shouted intermittently, "I'm going to be driven to death by my own granddaughter." Driven to death. Xiaoyun reached out in a panic, wishing that she could cover Old Madame's mouth. His Highness the Crown Prince was already in a thunderous rage, yet Old Madame still dared to howl here. Did she really think that His Highness wouldn't kill a shrew like her? Just now, Third Old Master and his family had insulted the Crown Princess. It wasn't as if they hadn't seen what happened to them. The Crown Prince doted on the eldest miss so much that he wouldn't let her suffer any grievances. The only reason His Highness was showing mercy to an old woman like her was probably because of the Marquis of Jiayuan and his wife. Old Madame slapped her knees and cried, "There's no place for us in this Marquis' estate. I can't stay in this Marquis' estate anymore. When you become an official, brothers and sisters will kill each other." What kind of sin did this old woman commit? I can't live anymore. Arbor suddenly pulled the Crown Prince's sleeve. The Crown Prince lowered his head and glanced at her. Seeing the impatience in her eyes, he immediately understood. He waved his hand and said, "Wait." The two soldiers then pulled Qiao Long over like a sack and threw him in front of the Crown Princess. Qiao Long's entire body trembled and he had already peed his pants in fright. When he fell to the ground, the smell of urine wafted out. Arbor reflexively shrank into Mo Lian's embrace and covered her mouth and nose with her sleeve, her eyes filled with disdain and contempt. "Old Madam, since you can't live in the Marquis' estate anymore, then this Crown Prince will permit you to leave the estate and live with the Qiao family's third branch. Come, each of the Qiao family's third branch will be punished with 30 planks. Throw Old Madam and the third branch out. In the future, they are not allowed to take half a step into the Marquis' estate. Violators will be beheaded." Chapter 580. When this verbal edict was passed down, it immediately caused the entire court to howl in anguish. Old Madame was even more dumbfounded. When did she sincerely want to leave the Marquis' estate? Where could she go to live such comfortable days after leaving the Marquis' estate? She had only casually hauled a few times, how could it be taken for real? She had just moved from a small estate to such a large Marquis' estate and hadn't enjoyed enough of the good days, yet the Crown Prince actually issued a verbal edict for her to move out and live outside with her youngest son and daughter-in-law. How could she accept this? She wasn't leaving. Where could her old bones go? Seeing that Old Madame was about to shout, Su Jiao truly reacted quickly and used her dirty black hand to forcefully cover Old Madame's mouth. Only by bringing Old Madame along with her would she be able to stay connected to the eldest branch in the future. Otherwise, after being thrown out this time, how could she continue to maintain a relationship with the eldest branch in the future? Su Jiao wasn't stupid. On the contrary, she was very shrewd. She knew that as long as she held Qiao Zhongbang's mother in her hands, with that man's honest and considerate personality, there would be a day when he would give in. At that time, their third branch would definitely be able to return. Su Jiao pulled her son Qiao Long and her husband Qiao Zhongheng along as the family of three prostrated themselves on the ground and humbly kowtowed several times. Then, they were unceremoniously picked up by the soldiers and beaten 30 times each before being directly thrown out of the gate. Granny Nyo's eyes darted around, and she had just opened her mouth to call out, "Ziqin. I'm a cow from the same village as you." But she was immediately swept over by the crown prince's cold gaze, and she was so frightened that she swallowed back her bellyful of words and knelt on the ground with weak limbs. Where did this idle person come from and make a fuss? Throw them out. The crown prince coldly reprimanded. Immediately, 7 or 8 soldiers swarmed over like tigers and wolves. Without any courtesy, they swung their clubs at Granny Nyo's family a few times. Dragging the group of people who were making a fuss, they directly shoved and threw them out of the main door, rolling together with Qiao Zhongheng's family of 3. Yo yo yo. Granny Nyo stroked her old waist and cried out in grief. Due to the crown prince's terror, she didn't dare to curse out loud and could only grumble in her heart. What an unlucky year. They originally wanted to follow Su Jiao's family into the Marquis's estate to enjoy themselves, but they didn't expect Su Jiao's family to be so incompetent that they actually angered the current crown prince and were directly swept out the door. Oh, 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 Granny Nyo is so angry, so angry. Wei Mingli was screaming madly in her heart. She was a young lady in her late 20s, yet she had been grabbed and thrown out of the door by those ferocious soldiers just now. Her reputation had been swept to the ground, and there was nothing left of it. It really made her heart shatter into pieces, and it was unbearable. The cold-looking crown prince glanced over with a terrifying gaze, causing everyone present to shut their mouths. Wei Mingli's heart was restless and restless, as if a cat had clawed at it. She cast a jealous and hateful glance at the Marquis's estate's tightly shut main door, her heart filled with unwillingness. "Grandmother, are we just going to be kicked out of the house like this and not do anything?" Wei Mingli twisted her sleeves and bit her lower lip, her words full of unwillingness. Her mother, Madame Sun, was shocked. She raised her hand and slapped her heavily on the back. "You're asking for trouble. How dare you spout nonsense? You were truly too audacious just now. You actually dared to stare at His Highness like this. Aren't you afraid of angering His Highness and beheading you all at once? Oh, isn't it because the young lady's heart is rippling? TSK, shameless, shameless." Chapter 581. Don't tell me you're delusional enough to think that you can win His Highness's favor with your looks. Eldest brother Wei's wife, Madame Ne Bo, was fuming because she hadn't gotten anything good out of the Marquis's estate. When she heard Madame Ne Sun's words, she immediately mocked and ridiculed Madame Ne Sun and her daughter as usual. How could Wei Mingli suppress her anger? She pointed at Madame Ne Bo and shouted angrily, "What do you mean? What's wrong with my looks? Who am I ugly to look at? You look like a crooked date, yet you still dare to mock others. Don't worry about it." Madame Ne Bo flew into a rage, while Madame Ne Sun was so frightened that she kept quiet out of fear. She tugged at her daughter's clothes and urged her to shut up. "You little bitch who doesn't know how to choose your words. Is this how you speak to your elders?" How could Madame Ne Bo be trifled with? The second branch and their daughter had humbly relied on the eldest branch for a living all this while. Now, they actually dared to defy her authority. How could Madame Ne Bo tolerate this? She rushed forward and grabbed Wei Mingli's hair with her broad and fat body. Slap, slap. She slapped Wei Mingli's face twice. "I'm hitting you for not knowing your manners. You little bitch, you still dare to take advantage of me." Ah! Wei Mingli only felt pain from Madame Ne Bo's fingernails scratching her left cheek. When she touched it, there was a trace of blood. She immediately felt angry, hateful, scared, and furious. Little bitch, you're delusional to think you can fly to the top. Why don't you look at your own face in the mirror? Only a blind man would fancy you. That's the high and mighty crown prince. Who do you think you are? Don't say that other people look down on you when you're the one who's cheap. Madame Neighbor's mouth was as sharp and unkind as she could be, scolding Wei Mingli until she cried in anger. Madame Nei's son was also clumsy with her words. She didn't dare to argue with Madame Neighbor, so she pulled her daughter's hand and urged, all right. Don't talk so much. Don't quarrel with your eldest aunt. Wei Mingli only felt a chill in her heart. She abruptly flung Madame Nei's son's hand away and screamed shrilly, "Get lost! Are you still my mother? Seeing your own daughter being bullied like this, you still have the face to persuade me not to say anything. It was that old woman who was scolding me. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you to death." Wei Mingli burst into tears. She turned around and ran like mad, disappearing in a short while. Madame's son was so scared that she trembled all over. She licked her lips and begged Madame Bo, "Sister-in-law, don't be angry with a child. You see, it's our first time in the capital. There are many adults here. What if Mingli gets lost? Let's chase after her and look for her. If you want to find it, go find it yourself. That little bitch was just lustful. Why did she care about her? She might have wanted to leave us a long time ago and go out to find a random man." Madame Bo shook off Madame's son's hand and looked at her with disdain. Madame's son's face turned pale and her lips trembled, but she subconsciously did not dare to refute. "What are you all arguing about?" This was Minshun Avenue. At the place where the officials gathered. If there was nothing important, ordinary people were forbidden to stay here and make noise. Go. Everyone, leave quickly. The city guards who heard the news ran over and chased them away without a second word. Elderly lady howled and wanted to go up to bang on the Marquise estate's main gate, but Su Jiao grabbed her hand forcefully. "Mother. Let's leave this place first. We can discuss this at length after we leave." The group of people came in high spirits and left dejectedly. Chapter 582. When she was escorted away from Minshun Boulevard by the city guards, elderly lady was still staring at the tightly shut doors of the Marquise estate, unwilling to give up. Su Jiao didn't say anything and only turned her head to glance at the Marquise estate's lintel, her eyes flickering with greed. She understood the eldest branch's husband and wife too well. They simply couldn't harden their hearts. She reckoned that in less than 3 days, Qiao Zhongbang and his wife would definitely be reluctant to part with their mother and come visit. This old fart was a bargaining chip in her hand. As long as she had this old fart, she could guarantee that the eldest branch's husband and wife would be docile. So, how could she allow her mother to continue loitering in the Marquise estate? Even if she had to seize her mother, she had to seize her mother to her side. Su Jiao snorted lightly and flung elderly lady's hand away after leaving the Marquise estate. Their family of 3 had just been beaten, so they couldn't walk nimbly. Her son, Qiao Long, was even more miserable. Not only was his butt severely injured, his mouth was also nearly smashed with a bamboo plank. This made Su Jiao's heart ache, and she couldn't help but hate Arbor to death in her heart. That rotten little bitch. Relying on His Highness the Crown Prince's favor, she dared to torment her precious son like this. One day, she would make her taste the pain of being humiliated like this. Humph, a man's favor came and went quickly. That person was the Grand Crown Prince of the Mo Kingdom, second only to one and above all. Could it be that he could spend his days guarding a little bitch like you? There would definitely be a chance for her to fall out of favor. At that time, she would definitely make you pay with your blood. Elderly lady started to pant after walking a few steps. She had been pampered all these years and lived like a prince. If she wasn't in a palanquin, she would be in a sedan chair, so there was no need for her to walk. Su Jiao turned to glance at elderly lady and cursed this cursed old woman in her heart. However, she still put on a virtuous appearance and helped elderly lady to Granny Nyo's family's donkey cart. At this time, she still had to rely on this old woman. It would be fine when she returned to the Marquis's estate one day. Before Chao Zhongbang and his wife came looking for her, she had to serve this old woman well and let this old woman know that she was a very filial person. It was just that this time, Su Jiao's scheme was probably going to fall through completely. Chao Zhongbang had been disappointed in his mother over the years. He would never take the initiative to bring his mother back. Moreover, since the Crown Prince had given the order to move the Empress Dowager out of the Marquis' manor so that his third brother's family could be filial to her, he wasn't stupid enough to go with the flow. As for Wei Ziqin, she had long given up hope. She wished that the Empress Dowager would go far away and never disturb them again. At this time, Su Jiao still didn't know. Along with Chao Zhongheng and his wife, they had been doing their best to show filial piety to this old lady along the way. They took care of every aspect, which comforted old madam. He thought that even though his eldest and second sons were unfilial and he had been chased out of the Marquis' household by his descendants at an old age, at least he still had a filial youngest son and daughter-in-law. It couldn't be considered too bad. After the group of ragged beggars were escorted out of Minshan Boulevard, they looked at the people coming and going on the streets and practically didn't know where to go. They didn't have money, and they were almost out of grain. They didn't even have a place to stay at this time. What should they do? Chao Zhongheng was already regretting it at this time. He thought that he should have bitterly begged to hug his eldest brother's thigh instead of acting like a big shot and acting like a tyrant. Chapter 583. As for Wei Mingli, after she impulsively ran away from Minshan Avenue, she ran madly along the road. As she ran, she started to regret it. The road ahead was boundless, and she didn't know where to go. Wei Mingli dazedly looked at the unfamiliar faces coming and going, and her footsteps gradually slowed down. Suddenly, she was knocked over by a passing carriage, and her entire body crookedly fell to the ground. She didn't feel the ice-cold ground in her impression, and instead threw herself into a warm embrace filled with ambergris. "Miss, are you all right?" A man's voice sounded beside her ear. Although it wasn't as magnetic and pleasant as His Highness the Crown Prince's, it was still passable. Wei Mingli looked up and met a pair of slightly swollen large eyes with thick eyebrows. The man's face wasn't the slightest bit handsome and could only be considered regular features. It truly couldn't compare to His Highness the Crown Prince, who had slightly raised phoenix eyes and a gorgeous appearance. Wei Mingli couldn't help but be taken aback. Why did she link everything to the Crown Prince? Her small face couldn't help but blush slightly. Could it be that she really was a young girl in love? "I've startled Mississippi." The man's gaze flickered as he looked at Wei Mingli, and he extended his hands to help her up from the ground. Wei Mingli was a bit embarrassed by the other party's scorching gaze. Although she came from the village, she was still a young lady in her late 20s. She was a bit shy from the man's gaze, and her neck drooped. Just as Granny Nyo, Su Jiao, and the others were searching the streets for a place to stay, the Chao family in the Marquis' estate finally had a harmonious and beautiful reunion dinner. Without the disturbance of unrelated people, everyone was in a cheerful mood, and the meal was very sumptuous. A little later, the Crown Prince took his leave and very naturally held the little fellow's small hand as they left the Chao estate together. It was only after they boarded the carriage that Arbor rolled her eyes at him. She clearly didn't have to return to the palace, but this person insisted on bringing her along. This guy had completely let go at this time and didn't even avoid her younger brothers and sisters. He held hands whenever he wanted and hugged whenever he wanted. He truly did as he pleased. You can do whatever you want in your own home. The Crown Prince smiled as he carried the little fellow onto his lap. He hugged her waist and whispered into her ear, "You must be tired after a long day. Do you want to sleep for a while?" Arbor felt his ears warm up and reached out to rub them. The Crown Prince let out a muffled laugh. He pulled down her little hand and helped her rub it. His gesture was very gentle. After he was done, he chuckled. "Your ears are itchy. What a bad person." Arbor turned his head and glared at him, but their faces were so close that when Arbor turned his head, his little mouth brushed past the corner of his mouth. It was as gentle as a feather, quietly plucking at his heartstrings. Our dear Chow Moo's entire body froze. The Crown Prince wasn't any better than her. He stared at her in a daze, deep whirlpools churning in the depths of his eyes. The little fellow saw that the situation was not good, and wanted to run away after teasing him. He struggled on his knees, and was about to break free from his embrace and roll to the other side of the carriage. The Crown Prince scooped her back and fixed her on his lap. He lowered his head and exhaled a mouthful of cold medicinal power into her ear. "Want to run?" A certain person instantly realized that her little hands and feet were somewhat unable to move. A pair of watery eyes widened as she angrily glared at his face that was close to hers. This guy was an apothecary, so how could he carelessly use medicinal power on her? What kind of medicinal power was this? Chapter 584. Heavens! Why was the drug so strong? It made her feel weak all over, and she couldn't even lift her arms and legs. Arbor glared at him. "Oh, you're definitely not convinced by using medicine like this. I'll let you use talismans on me first." The Crown Prince grinned as he pressed his face against hers and exhaled softly. The great Crown Princess was instantly revived. She took out a few talismans and pasted them all on the Crown Prince's forehead. The talismans floated around the Crown Prince's head. After a while, the Crown Prince burst out laughing. How annoying! These talismans were completely ineffective on him. In a fit of anger, Arbor reached out and circled his neck without thinking. She opened her mouth and bit his chin. She clearly felt the Crown Prince's body tense up, and her little mouth opened. His slender index finger caressed her little face, and he chuckled softly. "You bit the wrong place, baby." Chow Moo raised her head, and her small and round chin abruptly landed in his palm. She was just scratching her head in bewilderment when she suddenly felt her mouth being filled with warmth. In her daze, she heard the man chuckle lightly. "Bite here, darling. Harder." Darling Chow quivered and almost jumped up, her head hitting the roof of the carriage. "Heh, but that was just a thought." Her entire body was weak from the effects of the medicine, and she couldn't lift her arms or legs at all. This bastard. What was he doing? Wasn't he kissing her? Being glared at by a pair of round eyes, the Crown Prince couldn't help but laugh and couldn't kiss her anymore. He scooped her into his arms. "You keep staring at me. Do you still want to bite me? Here, I'll let you bite." "Arbor. This baby suddenly doesn't want to talk to you anymore. If you don't want to talk, then I'll continue kissing my baby." The Crown Prince moved closer to her little mouth. Our dear Chow Moo raised her hand and pressed it against his chest. Only then did she realize that she could move her arms and legs. Wah, this bad guy. One moment he could make her move, the next moment he made her unable to move. He was so annoying. She tugged at his long hair angrily. "Didn't you say that it was just a title and nothing else?" He revealed his wolf's tail so quickly. Wasn't he afraid that she would bite him? No. She couldn't bite him either. Once she did, he would take advantage of her. And, it's just a title. The Crown Prince looked at her innocently. After confirming their status, it was only natural for them to kiss, hug, and throw themselves at each other. You were the one who pounced on me and bit me. Do you still want to bite? Baby, I'll let you bite me whenever you want. Arbor. That does seem to be the case. Don't. Arbor looked at him speechlessly, his little stoic face unable to maintain a straight face. The Crown Prince was amused. He reached out to hug the little fellow and caressed her. He looked at her with a face full of regret. Next time, if you want to bite, just bite as much as you want. Don't hold it in, okay? I really don't want to talk to you anymore. By the way, baby, aren't you going to give me a gift in return? Mo Lien hugged his little body and shook it gently. Xiao Mu's watery eyes abruptly widened. What? Why was he giving a gift in return again? Just as she was thinking about when she owed that fellow a gift, he reached out and lifted her little chin. The two of them stared at each other, their gazes glued together. His slightly curved thin lips inched closer and closer to her face as her eyes widened. Something was wrong. Wasn't it just a title? Why were they kissing so frequently? This was only the first day of the betrothal. Whoosh! An arrow pierced through the air and suddenly streaked past her eyes, shattering the seductive atmosphere in the carriage. Chapter 585. The Crown Prince's gaze sharpened, and he took the opportunity to throw the little thing under his body to protect her. With a flick of his sleeve, the arrowhead was shattered into pieces. The countless arrows that followed were all blocked by the defensive barrier that he had set up. Whistling sounds came from outside. He Tion's group of soldiers had already started fighting with the black-clothed men swarming in from all directions. Arbor lifted her little head from his embrace and saw that his thin lips were tightly pursed. His eyes were sharp, and his expression was tainted with a trace of killing intent. It was obvious that he was extremely furious. Mo Lien. She couldn't help but call out. The Crown Prince lowered his head and lightly pecked her pink, moist lips. Don't be afraid. Wait for me to kill them. A bunch of blind idiots. They actually dared to disturb his beautiful moment of tenderness with his wife in his arms. They all deserve to die. Arbor pursed her little lips and thought, how can you tell that this baby is afraid? As they spoke, another storm of arrows flew over like thunder, striking the defensive barrier with a pitter-patter. The entire carriage was covered by the defensive barrier. Other than the first arrow that passed through the curtain, the rest were blocked. The carriage was not damaged at all. Mo Lien couldn't help but feel a little gloomy. It was all his fault for being so engrossed in holding the little fellow that he didn't notice that someone had set up an ambush at Huabei Gate. At this moment, the commotion outside Huabei Gate had already alarmed a group of patrolling Imperial Guards. A large group of soldiers was rushing over at top speed. The Crown Prince tightly pursed his lips and scooped up the little fellow's body. He swiftly darted out of the carriage, and a fierce look flitted across his phoenix eyes. In an instant, all the hundreds and thousands of arrows that were shooting towards the two of them stopped in midair and started to vibrate slightly, along with a light gurgling sound. The hundreds and thousands of arrows abruptly turned around and flew towards the roofs where the ambush was set up. Ah! Ear-piercing screams continuously sounded, accompanied by black shadows falling from the roofs. Arbor turned to look at He Tian and the others who were fighting with dozens of assassins. With a wave of her little hand, a handful of talismans appeared in her hand. The intermediate blue stun talisman was scattered in the wind. It was aimed at the group of black-clothed assassins. From the activation of the talisman to the stun, it was almost done in one breath. It was as if the man in black was drunk. His footsteps were unsteady as he swayed back and forth. He couldn't even hold the sword in his hand. When Tian and the others saw this, they immediately took the opportunity to kill the assassins. One of them saw that the situation was not good. He turned around and was about to escape. But he was hit in the chest by a flame. "Ah!" he screamed. Then, he fell to the ground. His head heavily knocked on the thick stone floor. At this moment, the patrolling Imperial Guards had already arrived. When they saw that it was the Crown Prince who had been attacked, they were all scared out of their wits and knelt down to accept their punishment. Tian rushed over and knelt down on one knee. "Your Highness, I have failed in my duty. I didn't notice the assassin's ambush." Mo Lien waved her hand at him and said, "They've taken some medicine to hide their scent. Bring some people over to take a look and clean up the archers on the roof." "Yes." Tian paused and asked, "Do you want to leave them alive? This prince knows who did it." Mo Lien curled her lips and shook her head noncommittally. "Clean it up." "Yes." Tian led a group of Imperial Guards to clean up the mess where the archers were lying in ambush. Mo Lien held Arbor's little hand and walked to the black-clothed man who was rolling on the ground and clutching his chest. Chapter 586. The two of them looked at each other, then walked up to the howling black-clothed man and looked at him coldly. With a flick of her finger, Xiao Mu took out a blue talisman and struck the person on the ground. After the blue light flashed past, the man suddenly quivered and fell silent. "Who sent you to assassinate me?" Arbor asked coldly. The assassin rolled on the ground and opened his mouth to say, "Too." Xiao Mu instantly felt her body lighten. Mo Lien reacted extremely quickly and tossed out a ball of fire that enveloped the assassin's entire body. At the same time, Xiao Qiao, who was hugging him, swiftly retreated backwards. Boom! The assassin suddenly self-destructed in the circle of fire that Mo Lien had set up. What happened? Arbor's eyes widened. She turned to look at Mo Lien, whose face was solemn and body tense. Mo Lien hugged the little girl and patted her back. She said softly, "It's okay." Arbor was confused. Why would my dictum talisman make him self-destruct? The dictum talisman was from the fourth jade slip of the golden talisman jade tome, just like the Vajra talisman and the invisibility talisman. With a single dictum talisman, anyone with a lower cultivation level than her would obediently speak the truth. That was why she had used the dictum talisman to ask about the assassin's identity. She didn't expect that the man would self-destruct. It has nothing to do with your talisman. Mo Lien hugged the little girl tightly and patted her back comfortingly. This person must have had a strand of his soul extracted and a hint planted in him. Anyone who tried to reveal the mastermind would be immediately detected and forced to self-destruct. So what did he mean by "too"? Arbor believed that her hearing was good. She had heard the word that the black-clothed man had spat out clearly. Mo Lien curled his lips, and he whispered into her ear. At this time, Tian and the others who were attracted by the huge explosion hurriedly turned back. When he saw that his two masters were unharmed, Tian heaved a sigh of relief. In his heart, he cursed the 18 generations of the assassin's ancestors. Why did he have to stir up trouble? Couldn't he just stop for a while? The news of the Crown Prince being attacked at Huabei Gate quickly spread to the ears of the Great King, the Queen, and the other concubines of the imperial harem. They all sent people to express their condolences. The Great King and Queen summoned the Crown Prince for questioning that very night. Xiao Mu naturally didn't join in the fun. After Mo Lien sent her back to the Eastern Palace, she washed up and climbed into bed. At this time, the Great King and Queen summoned the Crown Prince into the main hall. They looked at him carefully before asking, "Who tried to assassinate you?" Do you know? Your humble servant failed to protect you. Please punish me, great king. He Tian stepped forward and knelt down to beg for forgiveness. He Tian did not neglect his duty. It was my son's carelessness. The crown prince said calmly. The queen glared at her son somewhat angrily and turned to ask He Tian, did you find out where the assassins came from? He Tian immediately looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. The great king said angrily, what are you stopping yourself for? Speak. Your Majesty, great king and queen, please forgive me. Your humble servant found this on the assassin's body, but your humble servant didn't dare to say. He Tian presented a crescent-shaped jade pendant with both hands. The great king snatched the jade pendant from him and suddenly became furious. Guards! Go and invite noble consort Lin and the third prince here. Mo Lian's expression was leisurely. When Queen Zhao saw this, she became angry again. She pulled her son and said, Imperial Mother heard everything. Today's incident happened because you accompanied that girl from the Qiao family back to her maternal home. Chapter 587. When Mo Lian heard this, he was immediately unhappy with his mother's disdainful tone. Imperial Mother, what Qiao family's lass? That's your son's daughter-in-law. The crown princess that imperial father personally conferred upon her. The great king's mouth twitched at the side. He hated that he couldn't go up and give this son a slap on the back of his head. He was such a swindling brat all the time. Was he willing to issue this imperial edict? Ah! That was because he was threatened and forced. That day, the words that this damned son said to him in the imperial study, if he said it out loud, his mother would be angered to death. On account of their relationship as husband and wife, he was too embarrassed to tell Queen Zhao that her son was such a swindling person. In the end, the great king was infuriated when Queen Zhao received the news early this morning. She rushed to his study and angrily scolded him. At this moment, the great king was still suppressing a bellyful of anger. He didn't have a single day of rest. Was this something that couldn't be said? She only said one sentence about that Qiao family's lass, and her son immediately jumped out to defend her. The queen's long, shapely eyebrows shot up as she jabbed her son's forehead with a finger. Mother hasn't said anything about you yet. You and your imperial father rashly issued an imperial edict to that Qiao family's lass. Do you still have me, your mother, in your eyes? Queen Zhao was really about to be angered to death. On her end, she had been very enthusiastic and had been helping the crown prince choose the young misses from various manors. Alright, on this end, her husband and son didn't say anything. An imperial edict came out of nowhere and directly decided on the crown prince's consort at lightning speed. The key point was that she had never seen this crown princess from beginning to end. She also didn't know what her character was like. In her heart, she had two good candidates for the crown princess that she liked. Now, it was all ruined by this father and son pair. Imperial Mother, your son naturally respects you very much in his heart. Mo Lian was all smiles as he helped his mother to the side to sit down. But your son's daughter-in-law is also very, more, important. If your son can't marry this daughter-in-law, your son will have to be a bachelor for the rest of his life. The great king picked up a book and threw it at the back of the crown prince's head. This unfilial son. He really dared to shoot his mouth off in front of his mother. He did not even mention such shameless words in front of his queen. As expected, Queen Zhao widened her eyes in shock. She looked her son up and down, as if she wanted to see if he was telling the truth or not. Mo Lian tilted his head and dodged the book that his father threw at him. He looked at his mother innocently. Queen Zhao saw that his expression was exceptionally serious, and she was completely curious about that girl from the Qiao family. In Queen Zhao's heart, her son was the most outstanding child in the entire kingdom. There was no girl in the world who could match up to her outstanding son. In the past 20 years, he had never seen him care so much about any woman around him. This crown princess, not to mention that his son had begged for her, why was he so protective of her? How curious. In short, you put yourself in danger for that girl from the Qiao family. Mother is not happy. Queen Zhao said in dissatisfaction, tomorrow night at the palace banquet, you should let mother see that good wife of yours, right? Mo Lian nodded and supported Queen Zhao as she said, Mother, my wife is still young. When the time comes, don't scare her. Your son only has this one daughter-in-law. If you scare her away, your son will have to be a bachelor for the rest of his life. Queen Zhao was both anxious and angry. She jabbed her son fiercely. You child, you talk nonsense all day long. The great king also glared at the crown prince in annoyance. Just then, they heard an announcement from outside. Great king, noble consort Lin and the third prince have arrived. Tell them to get their asses in here. The great king roared angrily. Chapter 588. A woman dressed in a gold-embroidered brocade jacket and a lily-colored dress, who was close to 50 but had maintained herself well, was currently gracefully walking into the main hall. Behind her was a man in his late 20s, wearing an azure robe. His long hair was tied up high, and he could be considered fair and clean. This concubine greets the great king. Greetings to the queen. You raised a good son. Without another word, the great king picked up an inkstone and smashed it at noble consort Lin's head. Noble consort Lin immediately turned pale with fright. She abruptly prostrated herself on the ground and trembled as she asked, May I know why the great king is so angry? Smack! The inkstone smashed at noble consort Lin's feet, scaring her so much that she paled. You still have the face to ask us. The great king paced back and forth on the steps, stamping with rage as he said, Why don't you go ask your good son? Third son Mo Ting immediately knelt down and repeatedly cried out for injustice, Royal father, royal father. What exactly did son do? Why are you treating royal mother like this? Is this yours? The great king picked up the crescent-shaped jade pendant from the table and threw it at Mo Ting's face with a smack. We remember that this was a present your royal mother gave you in public on your 10th birthday. Is this the one? It's even engraved with your Ting character on the back. Mo Ting's face was filled with panic as he hurriedly cried out, Royal father, why is this jade pendant here? I already lost this jade pendant 2 days ago. Royal father is wise. How could the great king believe his nonsense? He stepped forward and kicked his son to the ground. You disgraceful thing. Of all times, it fell on the assassin who tried to assassinate your 6th brother. Do you think we're easy to fool? Mo Ting's eyes widened in horror. He naturally also received news of the crown prince's assassination attempt at Huabei Gate, and at that time, he even rejoiced in his misfortune in the palace. He didn't expect that this inexplicable fire would burn him all of a sudden. What was going on? He didn't do anything. This jade pendant really had already disappeared 3 days ago. How would he know how this jade pendant would appear at the scene of the crown prince's assassination attempt? Someone must have framed him. Father. The unlucky Prince Mo Ting shuffled a few steps on his knees and hugged the old great king's thigh with tears streaming down his face. He cried bitterly, It's really not a son. Your son can swear to the heavens that if I really send someone to assassinate 6th brother, I will be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Imperial father, think about it. If it was really his son who sent someone to assassinate his 6th brother, how could he leave such evidence at the scene? Ah, Imperial father. You have to believe me. I have never done such a thing. The Crown Prince glanced at the unlucky third prince and sighed. Father, I also believe that this matter was not done by third prince. The third prince Enchanting simply couldn't believe his ears. His younger brother, the Crown Prince, who was rumored to be like a spring breeze on the outside but was actually extremely cold and heartless on the inside, was actually pleading for him today. The old great king kept a straight face, a hint of disdain hanging from the corner of his mouth. He moved his leg and pulled it out of Enchanting's embrace. There's no proof for this matter. I will send people to investigate thoroughly. From today onwards, stay in the third prince's estate and don't come out until the truth comes to light. Noble Consort Lin immediately collapsed to the ground and repeatedly cried, Your Majesty, the third prince is innocent, Your Majesty. Your Majesty. The great king didn't want to listen anymore and instead angrily rebuked Noble Consort Lin, You're also grounded for 3 days. Properly reflect on what kind of son you taught. Chapter 589. When the pitiful third prince was chased out of the main hall by the great king, he only felt the cold wind blow by, and his body also shivered. The Crown Prince followed him out and sighed as he looked at him. Third royal brother, I believe you, but royal father won't listen to me either. When he saw that jade pendant, he insisted that it was third royal brother who did it. Sixth brother. The third prince abruptly turned his head, wishing he could grab the Crown Prince's hand and pour out his heart. However, the Crown Prince raised his fist to his lips and pretended to cough twice, avoiding the third prince's enthusiastic claws. Sixth brother, you really have to believe me. I can swear an oath to the heavens. Enchanting stuck out 2 fingers and swore. All right, third royal brother, of course I believe you. The Crown Prince hastily interrupted his string of swearing, cursing him inwardly for being annoying. Can't you let me finish speaking? This idiot. He's so stupid that he doesn't even know how to refute and only knows how to swear. What's the use of that? No wonder he was framed. Noble Consort Lin wiped her tears and said, Your Highness Crown Prince, I hope you can investigate clearly. Ting Her is devoted to your highness and definitely wouldn't do such a disobedient and immoral thing. Speaking of which, third royal brother was too careless. How could such a personal jade pendant fall into the hands of someone with intentions? Enchanting sighed and glanced at Enchanting. Actually, I originally had a very suspicious target in my heart. I could have mentioned it in front of royal father, but something like this happened to third royal brother. Enchanting's ears twitched, and he hastily lowered his voice to ask, Sixth brother, who do you suspect? Tell older brother in private so that older brother can have an idea. You also know that older brother isn't very astute and is easily confused. Heh, why don't I say you're stupid, the Crown Prince ridiculed in his heart. However, he was all smiles on the surface. The Crown Prince also lowered his voice. The 2 brothers leaned their heads together and whispered, Third royal brother, actually, I feel that second royal brother is extremely suspicious. I also have a clue in my hands that points to him. Who knew that third royal brother's jade pendant would fall at the scene of the assassination? I can't help you explain yourself to Imperial Father. Enchanting's face instantly turned green, and he smacked his thigh as if he had thought of something. He hurriedly said to the Crown Prince, Sixth brother, elder brother thought of something, so I'll return to the estate first. Watching Noble Consort Lin and the third Prince Enchanting leave in a huff, Enchanting muttered to herself, Who has the time to play this kind of little game with you? He didn't even have time to accompany his wife. This bunch of crooked melons and cracked dates, looking for trouble for him. He'll just let them fight amongst themselves. Your Highness, is the second prince planning to do something? Huifeng whispered as he followed behind the Crown Prince. Why not? I let him assassinate me for nothing. Our dear Mo Lien was filled with anger when he recalled the seductive scene that was interrupted inside the carriage. Seriously, this second prince was tired of living. Since he dared to play assassination with him, then he'll find more people to play with him to his heart's content. Didn't you say a while ago that a downtrodden royal grandson of West Chou Kingdom fled to the second prince's estate? The crown prince waved his hand at Hui Feng and instructed him. Hui Feng's mouth twitched, and he nodded repeatedly before leaving to carry out the order. His master was digging a grave for his second highness. But who told his second highness to be so blind? Your second highness, you're on your own. Chapter 590. Second brother, do you know the consequences of provoking this crown prince? Prince Mo sneered. After walking slowly for a while, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. His expression froze for a moment, and his figure flashed as he rushed toward the Eastern Palace. She hadn't entered Paradise Planet to take a look for several days. Ever since that day she tracked the poison-tailed butterflies and got rid of a poison master, she had Sapling move all the poison-tailed butterflies into Paradise Planet. Now that she wanted to take a look, she had Sapling bring her into Paradise Planet. Cho had specially opened up a separate poison garden for her, and even moved some of the poisonous flowers and herbs in the original medicinal field into that poison garden, completely separating it from the medicinal field. Now that she was strolling in the poison garden, she saw a group of colorful poison-tailed butterflies fluttering in the medicinal field. An enormous black shadow suddenly descended, flapping its wings as it flew toward her. Looking closely, the giant butterfly in front of her had already transformed into a human, with a pair of long and beautiful dark blue wings on its back. In the middle was the figure of a little loli. This was the strange creature that had swooped down from the sky when she wanted to leave the Poison Master's courtyard that day. The queen of the poison-tailed butterflies had named her Xiao Xiao. Speaking of which, that pygmy poison master probably couldn't find peace in the underworld. The poison-tailed butterflies that he had nurtured his entire life were all taken in by this little fellow for her own use. The most interesting thing was that before he died, he didn't even get to see the poison-tailed butterfly queen. After the poison-tailed butterfly queen broke out of its cocoon, it happily pounced on classmate Arbor, directly acknowledging him as its master. Arbor thought that pygmy would probably cry injustice to the king of hell when he entered the underworld. Tilting his little head, Arbor waved at Xiao Xiao, who was fluttering her wings. Xiao Xiao happily shrunk her figure, turning into a butterfly as thick as a finger, and fluttered into Arbor's hand. She cutely called out, "Master, Master, you've come to see me." "That's right. How are you and your little friend staying?" "This place is great. The mystic energy is rich, and we're free. It's too suitable for us to live in." Xiao Xiao happily fluttered her wings. "That's good." Arbor knew that her Paradise Planet was a good place to live, and the little fellows definitely wouldn't be dissatisfied. She was just asking casually. She stroked Xiao Xiao's wings. "Xiao Xiao, send some butterflies out with me. I want them to go somewhere to scout for information." "Yes, master." With a wave of Xiao Xiao's hand, 3 small black butterflies fluttered up to Qiao Mu, fluttering up and down. "Master, Xiao 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 Xiao, master," she said. "If there's anything you need, just tell them and they'll do it." "Xiao Xiao 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 Xiao." Qiao Mu nodded. Although her small stoic face was expressionless, the sapling Cho could tell that its little master was still very happy. "Master, master, I can also go out. I can also work for you." The water child dashed over and bounced several times in front of Qiao Mu. "No need. It's just a small matter. You can all stay here." Master, you'd better go out quickly. I can feel the Crown Prince's aura spreading over. He seems to be very angry." Cho said suddenly. Chapter 591. Xiao, I'll bring them out now. Remember to send me feedback from time to time. Arbor hurriedly had Cho send her out. Almost at the same time, she felt the Crown Prince's raging aura approach. With a whoosh, his figure landed in the bedchamber. He panicked. He hurried all the way back. But when he entered the Eastern Palace and saw the slender figure, he was clearly stunned. He looked her up and down in a daze. His entire heart seemed to settle down, and his expression relaxed slightly. Where did you go just now? Mo Lian appeared beside her in a flash and pulled her into his embrace. Xiao Mu blinked her eyes. I'm telling you, if you disappear without a word like this again, I'll tie you to my side one day and not allow you to leave my side. Mo Lian lowered his head and was about to bite the little fellow's mouth. Our dear Xiao Mu hurriedly reached out a small paw to block his lips and silently communicated with the sapling. Can you bring Mo Lian into Paradise Planet now? No. Last time, Cho was almost exhausted from bringing in so many living creatures from the outside world. The Crown Prince is such a big person. Let's wait a while. Arbor's eyes curved suspiciously. Only one person. Last time, you brought in so many butterflies, but they were fine. Other than Master, living people are the hardest to bring in. It's another matter if they're dead. Scram. Who are you talking about dying? Arbor's beautiful brows immediately furrowed. No, I didn't say anything. The Crown Prince's cultivation is so high, how could anything happen to him? Wow, Master is so scary. She quickly smoothed things over. Actually, Master, as long as your cultivation increases, it won't be so difficult to bring in living creatures in the future. Cho immediately said fawningly. I believe in Master. It won't take long for you to have a big breakthrough. In Paradise Planet, Butterfly Queen Xiao looked at the fawning Treant with disdain. She unhappily flapped her wings and returned to her poison garden. Why aren't you saying anything? The Crown Prince reached out and held her small chin. His eyes were slightly suspicious as he looked at the silent little fellow in front of him. You disappeared just now. For a moment, just like 2 years ago, he could no longer catch her aura. This made him very anxious, and he hurriedly rushed to the Eastern Palace, afraid that the little fellow would disappear without a word, and that they would not see each other for many years. Why aren't you saying anything? The Crown Princess increased the force in her hand slightly, causing Arbor, who was communicating with Cho, to come back to his senses. Jojo, you're not allowed to run. He lifted her up and looked her in the eye. Can you not run? Where did I go? Arbor looked at him speechlessly. It was all her fault that her cultivation wasn't high enough. If she could bring him to Paradise Planet to take a look, wouldn't everything be clear at a glance? She ran away. He leaned over and bit her lips. Just now. Let's not run anymore, okay? Running makes me nervous. Next time, if I can't feel your presence, I'll take measures against you, okay? Ah Pui, what measures do you want to take? Arbor struggled in his arms, but failed to break free. She angrily bared her little white teeth and bit him. The Crown Prince, this shameless person, hurriedly adjusted his position and said with a smile, Come, don't bite the wrong place. The two people's forelips met. Chapter 592. Splash. A trickle of water splashed onto Prince Mo's face. Arbor's little finger was encircled by a ring of clear spring water, glistening and flowing back and forth between her fingertips. At this moment, the handsome and otherworldly Crown Prince Mo was looking at her in bewilderment with a head full of water, his long hair dripping wet. This appearance. Arbor couldn't help but snicker, and then burst out laughing. Mo Lien looked at her in a daze for a while, then suddenly hugged her tightly and said excitedly, "Jojo, Jojo, you smiled at Jojo. Look at this fool, was it worth it to be so happy just because she smiled?" He wanted to grab her and fly up. Arbor reached out a pair of little claws and rubbed his wet face, a faint gentleness flashing through her big eyes. "You're wet, go take a bath." "Okay, then you should sleep early. Don't worry about the palace banquet tomorrow night, I'll go with you." Prince Mo rubbed the little fellow's forehead. Arbor snorted. "I'm not worried at all. It's others who should be worried. If someone is blind enough to provoke me, I'll help you hit them back." Prince Mo immediately agreed without any restraint. Arbor pursed her watery lips, her eyes shining brightly. She poked his chest with a finger. "I'll hit them myself." Okay, hit them yourself. My Jojo is so powerful, you definitely won't be at a disadvantage." Prince Mo flicked his sleeves, and the water on his body was dried by an invisible fire. He placed her on the bed, held her little hand and asked, "What was that just now?" "It's the power of the essence water that I fused with." Arbor tilted her little head to look at him. "It's just that my cultivation isn't high enough now, so I can only control this much water." "Very good." There was a hint of a smile in the Crown Prince's eyes as he rubbed her head. "You've yet to break through to the spirit realm, but you already control the most powerful water spirit, the Holy Spirit water that can crush 9th level spirit water. When you break through to the spirit realm, you'll naturally be able to use it with ease." 9th layer spiritual water. Arbor had never heard of it before and was curious. That's right, 9th layer spiritual water. When breaking through to level 15 Great Mystic Cultivator Realm, as long as one can comprehend one of the 5 spirits, they can enter the spirit realm. The Crown Prince explained, but normal mystic cultivators can only comprehend the 1st to 5th levels of the 5 spirits. Those who were able to comprehend the 6th level of spirit fire and water were all extraordinarily talented individuals within the spirit realm. You have surpassed the comprehension of the 9th level of spiritual water. I didn't comprehend anything. I can use the power of water after fusing with the essence water. The little fellow's explanation made a certain Crown Prince's mouth twitch. Yes. My Jojo is amazing. The Crown Prince laid her down and covered her with the blanket with a grin. He leaned over and gently kissed her forehead. Go to sleep. Where are you sleeping? Arbor suddenly asked. Are you keeping me? The Crown Prince was startled, and a mischievous smile immediately surfaced on his lips. The bed is quite big, so we can squeeze and sleep together. Pretend I didn't say anything. Darling Chow pulled the blanket over her little head and shrank inside, wrapping herself into a cocoon. The man chuckled softly and reached over to pull the blanket over her, insisting on pulling her little head out of the blanket. All right, hurry and sleep. Don't suffocate yourself. Be good, okay? Chirp. Receiving a kiss on her little face, the little one muttered and turned her face away. Chapter 593. Sleep well, there's no rush to wake up early. Tomorrow, when I'm done, I'll come back and tell you a big joke. The Crown Prince narrowed his eyes and smiled. He reached out to tuck the little fellow in before leaving. Until his bamboo-like figure gradually disappeared from the window outside the bedchamber, Arbor continued to stare in a daze. She suddenly shrank her head into the blanket and reached out to touch her slightly hot little face. His words lingered in her heart, and not long after, she poked her head out of the blanket. She was as timid as a small animal in the snowy night, her eyes especially bright in the dark night. There was only one candle lit in the corner of the room, and the faint yellow light spread out. After tossing and turning for a while, she didn't know when she fell asleep. When she opened her eyes, it was already late in the morning. Xiao Yao heard her movements and immediately walked over with a smile. She helped her freshen up and change her clothes with a smile on her face. "Little mistress, did you sleep well last night?" "Not bad." Arbor pursed her lips. She thought that the crown prince must have given her some medicine, otherwise, how could she sleep so soundly later on? "That's great." Xiao Yao took out a red dress for her to change into. She said, "Her Majesty the Queen is holding a small banquet tonight to see Little Mistress." "Little Mistress, you don't have to worry too much. Her Majesty the Queen is an especially forgiving person." Arbor fiddled with the jade beads in her hand and said with a childish attitude, "If she doesn't treat me well, I'll ignore her." Xiao Yao almost laughed out loud. She fiddled with her hair. "Comb it again tonight. It's still early, so let's leave it like this for now. Does Little Mistress want to eat now?" "I'm not that hungry. I'll go read for a while. I'll just get some snacks later. It's better to eat some staple food." "No need. I'll eat later. Get more food. After eating, I'll go to that whatever palace banquet." The little fellow waved her hand. She hugged the book and ran to the brocade couch by the window to read. Xiao Yao was a bit dumbfounded. After staring blankly for a while, she couldn't help but want to laugh. Little Master wanted to eat his fill so that he could join the battle later. Mo Lien didn't come back until the evening. Arbor saw her, put down his book and ran over. "I've finished reading all the medical books. You can send them back now. It's snowing outside again." Mo Lien was very wet all the way, so he didn't go forward to hug her. Instead, he prepared to change his clothes. "All right, send it back and see if there are any other medical books in the Imperial Physicians Building." Speaking of which, it was really funny. The old doctors of the Imperial Physician Building actually jointly wrote a letter to complain about him in front of his imperial father. The old great king even called the crown prince over and reprimanded him. But in the end, the crown prince still didn't return the book to the imperial physician, so the matter was left unsettled. The little fellow followed closely behind him. "Then let's eat." Mo Lien took off his outer robe and changed into a clean one. He reached out to hug her. "Are you hungry? Set the table." "Yes, Your Highness." Xiao 11Z retreated and gave the order. "I'm not that hungry, right?" The little fellow had just chewed on a peach. She rubbed her stomach. "It's only when I'm full that I have the strength to beat people up." She had a feeling that this banquet was going to be a torturous one. That's why she had to eat her fill in advance so that she wouldn't have to listen to some people's chatter when she was hungry. The crown prince, what should he do when his wife didn't rely on him at all? Beating people up was so tiring. Did he need his wife to do it? Chapter 594. That's right. I had nothing to do this afternoon, so I roasted 2 fish for you. But it's cold now, so let Xiao Yao heat it up for us to eat. Since he liked to hold her, she was too lazy to walk by herself. The two of them sat on the embroidered couch. Mo Lien turned the little girl's face and looked at her with a smile. "Jojo is so capable." "Can't do it." Arbor frowned. "It doesn't taste good, and it's a bit burnt. You should roast it next time." It was also because these fish were born and bred in Paradise Stars Lake, so it was a pity to waste their rich profound energy. Otherwise, she would have thrown them away. "Jojo's cooking is delicious." As she spoke, Xiao Yao smiled and brought people forward to serve the dishes. 2 slightly burnt fish. Mo Lien was a bit surprised when she took the first bite. The profound energy wrapped around the fish was very rich, as if these fish had been raised in some profound realm for a long time. He glanced at her and didn't say anything. Thinking about the peaches that the little girl had taken out earlier, he thought that this little fellow must have had a fortuitous encounter. After the two of them finished eating, Xiao Yao went forward to tidy up Arbor's clothes and hair again. Only then did the two of them leave the door and board the carriage, heading towards the central palace. At this time, the snowflakes were a bit heavy. Arbor reached out a hand to the curtain and watched the snowflakes fall on her palm, sparkling brightly. Her brows moved slightly. She thought of the Spirit Division Records Technique chapter, which recorded a strange technique related to the water spirit. Using water to condense ice, ice to melt snow. Ice as needles, ice as arrows, and snow as fragments of dust. It could harm people invisibly. With her current cultivation, she couldn't use the water spirit's power in a large area. If she could secretly use it in a small area, she would be able to obtain a strange victory in battle. The Crown Prince saw her sitting in the carriage silently staring at the 6-chestnut snowflake in her palm. He couldn't help but raise his brows and whisper a word to the driver. The snow in her palm suddenly melted into a bit of water, and then a small stream of water emerged from her palm. It didn't turn into ice for a long time, and Arbor's forehead condensed a trace of sweat. The carriage quietly walked on the palace road. Without Arbor's knowledge, it took a long detour and slowly headed toward the central palace. Condensing water into ice was easier said than done. It was impossible for her to be born with the ability to change the form of water and easily condense water into ice. Chio's assistance would always be an assistance. Only when she could control the water manipulation ability would it be her own power. This required her to try again and again to test the waters and put in more effort. Because she had fused the life essence water, she might have a success rate that was more than 10 times higher than others. However, she still needed to constantly try to solidify it. There was nothing that could be easily obtained. The Crown Prince stared at her with a smile on his lips. His Qiao was truly a person with outstanding innate talent. Even a snowstorm could open the door to enlightenment for her. This kind of comprehension ability was already one of a kind in this world. After an hour, Arbor grasped the essentials. Under her control, a small stream of water condensed into a piece of sparkling ice crystal. In a flash, this piece of ice crystal turned into a 6-chestnut snowflake, flashing in her hand. When she suddenly raised her hand, it suddenly flew out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The snowflakes cut through several nearby trees. After the carriage moved far away, the trees split from the middle. The upper half of the branches suddenly fell to the ground and split into 2 pieces. Arbor sighed and turned to meet the Crown Prince's smiling gaze. I just got home. You don't have to wait for me until 11 o'clock. Chapter 595. This kind of control over the water spirit can absolutely be considered as a gift blessed by the heavens. Mo Lien pinched her small face. After all, his little one hadn't even broken through to the spiritual realm. Using the water spirit required spiritual energy as a guide at the very least, right? However, this little one broke all the rules. No level 11 mystic cultivator could use mystic energy to control the water spirit. This wasn't as simple as skipping levels to control it. This little one was definitely an oddball. If she wasn't exceptionally gifted, then what was she? The Crown Prince looked proud as he warmed up the little one's slightly cold hand. Then are we late? Arbor looked up at him when she saw that the sky had already turned completely dark. It's a special situation. I've already sent someone to report to Mother Queen's brilliant Sun Hall, the Crown Prince said with a smile. Then will your mother think that I was late on purpose? Although the little one looked aloof on the outside and didn't say many things, she was actually an especially soft and meticulous person. Sometimes she thought a lot, but she wouldn't say it all out loud. Her intuition toward people was also especially sharp. She could almost instantly determine who was good to her and who was hostile to her. Mo Lien could already sense her slight uneasiness, so she quickly held her small hand and rubbed it. Mother Queen is a very magnanimous person, so don't be nervous. Besides, I'll always be by your side no matter what happens. We'll always stand together. I'm not nervous, Arbor said with a stoic face. If your mother doesn't treat me well, I won't talk to her. Prince Mo looked at this darling, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. All right, then I won't talk to her either. Let's both ignore her. Mo Lien nodded solemnly. Xiao, 11Z and the other eunuchs and royal maids accompanying them almost staggered and knelt on the ground. Oh my, their Lord Crown Prince was originally a very willful and reckless person. Now, great, the Crown Princess seemed to be 100 times more willful than their lord. What were they going to do in the future? Wouldn't their days be abnormally lively? Xiao Mu turned to look at him and harumphed, non-committally disagreeing with his words. The carriage did not take any more detours and quickly stopped at the entrance of the middle palace. The two of them got out of the carriage and didn't use the palanquin. Instead, they held hands and slowly walked through the snow. Xiao, 11Z quickly opened up an umbrella and called for the palace maids on the side to hastily hold umbrellas for their two willful masters. Along the way, the roofs and trees on both sides of the road were already covered in a thin layer of snow white. If this snow continued for the whole night, it would definitely accumulate again tomorrow. Inside the brilliant sun hall where the queen was holding a banquet. A group of noble ladies with titles and daughters-in-law from aristocratic families were already seated, waiting for the banquet to begin. The queen was dressed in a golden and red robe with layers of clouds embroidered on the hem. She sat upright on the seat of honor, drinking tea leisurely from beginning to end, not saying a word. There were only a few whispers below, and no one dared to say anything. Until the announcement of Consort Zheng's arrival broke the apparent tranquility of the palace. All of the noble ladies with titles and daughters-in-law from aristocratic families stood up and bowed, saying in unison, "Greetings to Consort Zheng." Her Highness Consort Zheng, who had a slender waist and a voluptuous and tall figure, was dressed in a long red dress with rippling ripples. She wore a gorgeous hairpin with 8 treasures and pearls in her hair. With the help of the palace maids, she gracefully swayed her way to the first seat below the seat of honor. The top-grade pearls hanging next to her cheeks clanked as they bumped against each other as she walked. Chapter 596. Her red lips were slightly curved, and her figure was graceful. Although she was in her early 20s, she was dressed as pretty as a 15 or 16-year-old girl, so she didn't look too out of place. All the concubines and princesses also stood up to greet her. In front of Consort Zheng, other than Her Majesty the Queen, who didn't need to worry about Consort Zheng due to her precious and noble status, no one else dared to be careless. Dispense with the formalities. Consort Zheng reached out to touch the jade tassel pendant that had been scraped to the side of her face, a frivolous smile hanging on her lips. She unhurriedly curtsied to Her Majesty the Queen, who was sitting at the head of the table. "Greetings, Your Majesty the Queen." Queen Zhao glanced at her indifferently and nodded. Consort Zheng's but was just about to sit down on the first seat below the head of the table when Queen Zhao irreverently curled her lips and coldly said, "Younger sister Zheng, you're sitting in the wrong seat. That's where the Crown Princess is sitting." Consort Zheng's smile immediately froze on her pretty face. Cough. One of the 2 middle-aged concubines sitting below the head of the table choked on her tea and coughed out a laugh. Both of them were in their 40s and had maintained themselves well. Although they couldn't be considered young and beautiful, they still retained their charm. One of them was Consort Qing, the mother of the great king's son Mo Jiao, and the other was Lu Fei, the mother of the second prince Mo Lu. The one who coughed out a laugh was Her Highness Consort Qing, and Consort Qing was currently glaring at her fiercely. The latter pretended to wipe her mouth with a handkerchief and didn't say anything, but the smile on her lips couldn't be wiped away. "Older sister Zheng, come sit here." A royal concubine in her 20s gently pointed at the seat in front of Consort Qing as she spoke to noble Consort Qing with a grin. Consort Qing then glared at her fiercely and sneered, "Your Majesty the Queen, this daughter-in-law who was suddenly betrothed is really putting on airs. What time is it now? Why aren't they here yet?" Just as she finished speaking, a eunuch outside the brilliant Sun Hall reported, "The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess have arrived." The group of noble ladies and aristocratic families immediately revealed expectant gazes as they eagerly turned their heads to look at the open door outside the hall. Consort Qing immediately lost her composure. She straightened her back and glared at the seat under her butt. If her gaze could split the seat, she would have done it long ago. That damned old hag. Why didn't she say that this was the Crown Princess seat earlier? Why did she have to wait until she was sitting down? How embarrassing. Consort Qing stood in front of the seat. She felt that it would be too embarrassing to walk away now, so she didn't sit down. Instead, she looked coldly at the couple entering the hall hand in hand. Who knew how many people's gazes they had attracted on their way here? The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess were dressed in red as they walked in hand, looking very eye-catching. The man was tall and slender, handsome like an exquisite piece of jade, while the girl was icy and beautiful like the cold moon. No one could find a single flaw in their appearances, so much so that everyone couldn't help but think the same thing in their minds when they saw this scene. A match made in heaven. Mu Qianqian felt like she was sitting on pins and needles, as if there were 17 to 18 needles poking her under her butt. She shifted her body uneasily, and her malicious eyes glared straight at the red-clothed little lady who was walking past her. So hateful. Was it her? The lowly lass who suddenly appeared out of nowhere and stole her crown princess position. Mu Qianqian completely didn't recognize that she had seen Arbor in the Qin estate before. At that time, Arbor was still in disguise, so her current appearance was naturally worlds apart. Chapter 597. Abruptly, Arbor turned his head, and his icy eyes apathetically shot a vicious glance at Mu Qianqian. That glance made one's heart tremble with fear, as if it could kill a person on the spot with a single glance. That was a ruthless attack that our dear Qiao Mu had used her spiritual conscience to directly infiltrate the other party's conscience. Was this darling someone that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could stare at? Mu Qianqian immediately felt her mind go blank, and a piercing pain assaulted her brain. With a shriek, she fell backward. The people sitting behind her were precisely the second branch's mother and daughter, Madame Nei Lu and Mu Jilan. Caught off guard, Mu Qianqian knocked over the entire small table, and all the soup and water spilled onto them. The second branch's mother and daughter immediately shrieked and jumped up, attracting Her Majesty the Queen's stern gaze from the head seat. The young misses nearby all covered their mouths and chuckled as they looked disdainfully at the Mu family's mother and daughter who were jumping up and down. Madame Nei Lu's heart jolted, and she hastily pulled her daughter Mu Jilan forward to kneel. "This commoner and my daughter have been disrespectful in front of Your Majesty the Queen. It's truly because eldest miss suddenly attacked, and this commoner and my daughter were caught off guard." Mu Qianqian also hastily knelt forward and cried pitifully, "Your Majesty is wise. Just now, when she passed by Qianqian, she used some kind of witchcraft to glare fiercely at Qianqian, which caused me to suddenly lose my balance and fall backward." As she spoke, Mu Qianqian raised her sleeve to point at Arbor's back. "Slap her." The Crown Prince abruptly turned around and shouted sternly. Mu Qianqian's eyes bulged in shock as she dumbfoundedly looked at His Highness the Crown Prince, who had suddenly turned hostile and merciless. Just as an indoctrination nanny was about to step forward and press down on Mu Qianqian with a wooden plank, Mu Qianqian wailed, "Your Majesty the Queen, Your Majesty the Queen." Qianqian doesn't know what she did wrong to anger His Highness the Crown Prince. Is the Crown Princess someone a wicked commoner like you can casually point fingers at? What her? Who is she? The Crown Prince glared at the indoctrination nanny, who had stopped, and said ruthlessly, "Don't you know how to hit her? Do you want us to do it personally? Double it." The indoctrinating nanny's heart shuddered, and she promptly slapped Mu Qianqian's mouth with the paddle. After 3 hits, Mu Qianqian's originally glossy and seductive red lips broke, and tears streamed down her face like beads from a broken necklace. When Queen Zhao saw this, she couldn't bear it anymore. The Queen previously had 3 or 4 crown princess and secondary consort candidates that she favored, and one of them was this Mu Qianqian. Although Mu Qianqian's father wasn't an official in the imperial court, he was the family head of one of the capital's 8 great patrician families, the Talisman patrician family. Moreover, it was said that this Talisman aristocratic family was a branch family of a Talisman aristocratic family in the Divine Prefecture. Their influence was absolutely not to be underestimated. That was the mysterious divine land that was praised by tens of thousands of people. Compared to the Shuntian manor behind Consort Jing, it was naturally 1 level higher. If the Crown Prince were to marry the daughter of such an aristocratic family, it would definitely be of great help to him. The other few were also daughters of high-ranking officials or daughters of aristocratic families. Their looks and knowledge were all very good, so they were more than qualified to be secondary consorts. However, she didn't expect that father and son pair to pull off such a stunt and casually settle on the Crown Princess candidate. At this time, the Queen was currently sizing up this Crown Princess. She saw that she was only 14 or 15 years old, but her small face was glistening, snow-white, and jade-like. However, what was up with that expressionless small face? "I'm done for today. I'll try my best to add more chapters tomorrow. I've always been writing 6 chapters a day. Older sister, I had to take 3 days of leave to write the first 10 chapters. How could I take leave every day? Wouldn't I get hacked by my boss? Other than writing chapters in my spare time, I basically don't leave the house at all. Of course, I'm already cut off from TV and games. I've already done my best. I don't even have time to save chapters when the editor told me to. Ow. Chapter 598. Greetings to Royal Mother. Prince Mo walked up while holding Jojo's small hand and curtsied to his mother. After witnessing the Crown Prince's severe punishment of Mu Qianqian, the group of royal concubines, madams, and noble ladies all tacitly understood that the Crown Prince attached great importance to this consort. No one would continue to idiotically provoke this Crown Princess's dignity in front of the Crown Prince. Therefore, they all obediently curtsied to the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Our dear Qiao Lin, who was at the back of the crowd, couldn't help but twist her small body in excitement. Her mother, Wei Ziqin, patted her small hand lightly and shot her a warning glance before she finally settled down. Wei Ziqin had arrived early with her daughter, but her eldest daughter didn't show up even after waiting for a long time. Now that she saw the Crown Prince personally escorting her eldest daughter over and even defending her in front of others, she couldn't help but be extremely delighted. She liked this son-in-law no matter how she looked at him. Queen Zhao was a protective mother, so she naturally wouldn't embarrass her son in front of everyone. Even if she disapproved of our dear Qiao Lin's stoic face, she naturally wouldn't show it on the surface. She had them dispense with the formalities with a chuckle and secretly cast a glance at her son. Truly, her son had grown up and she couldn't do as she wished. Could it be that she would eat the Crown Princess up? She even specially sent the Crown Princess over. She couldn't see how this little lady was worthy of her peerlessly outstanding son. She could tell at a glance that this young lady had an icy temperament. Her small face didn't even have the slightest hint of a smile when facing the elders. Heaven knew how much her son would suffer from chasing after her. When she thought of how such a good son would suffer grievances in front of a young lady, Queen Zhao didn't feel good about it. In Queen Zhao's opinion, her son was the best in the world. When young ladies saw him, they should be like Mu Qianqian and the likes, swarming over like bees. How could they be like darling Qiao, indifferent and expressionless all day long? Our dear Qiao Lin keenly detected a trace of dissatisfaction coming from the queen's direction, and she looked up with a frown at the queen with sparkling eyes. What the heck? You actually dare to frown at me? Queen Zhao kept complaining in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. All right, leave your crown princess behind. The queen grumbled in annoyance and glanced at the crown prince. The crown prince nodded with a smile. Then this subject will come back in 2 hours to bring the crown princess back. Queen Zhao wished she could send the crown prince flying with a smack of the back of his head. Her expression was simply brilliant. The expressions of the other concubines and noble ladies were also quite interesting. Could these women eat the crown princess or something? Wasn't it just a small banquet in the palace? The crown prince was still worried about sending her back and forth. She was really a delicate girl. It looked very worrisome. Queen Zhao was thunderstruck by the stoic face again. The stoic face was expressionless from beginning to end. When she heard the crown prince say he was going to pick her up, she took it as a matter of course. Just as everyone was madly ridiculing her in their hearts, they saw the little stoic turn around and say to the crown prince, "How about an hour? I'm sleepy." The crown prince nodded happily and patted the little fellow's head. Okay. Queen Zhao and all the concubines were flabbergasted. Consort Jing couldn't resist laughing out loud and mocking, "The crown princess really is delicate beyond belief. You just came to attend the banquet and want to leave immediately? TSK, where are you putting Her Majesty the Queen's face, he he he." The little stoic turned to look at Consort Jing and creased her brows. "You are the queen." Chapter 599. Consort Jing was dumbstruck for a moment before retorting angrily, "I am Consort Jing. Your mistress hasn't even said anything yet, so why are you, a concubine, spouting so much nonsense? You don't even know the slightest bit of etiquette." Arbor irritably prodded her and turned her head away, no longer looking at her. This time, everyone was truly shocked. It was fine if the crown princess didn't say anything, but the moment she opened her mouth, she verbally attacked Consort Jing. She truly wasn't the slightest bit polite. Consort Jing gnashed her teeth, wishing for nothing more than to slap Arbor's expressionless little stoic face. However, she still had some IQ and knew that the crown prince was here. If she dared to lay a hand on the crown princess, she would definitely be sent flying by the crown prince, who was protective of his own. Thus, no matter how much she ground her teeth, she endured it and didn't make a move. She merely brushed past the crown princess in an unpleasant tone and said to Queen Zhao, "Your Majesty the Queen, the crown princess dares to speak so rudely in front of you and torment us concubine mothers. I really don't know what other outrageous things the crown princess would do if you weren't present." Crown princess. The queen put on an act and berated, "How can you be so rude to the noble consort? The noble consort is also a concubine." A trace of impatience hung on the little stoic's face. "She speaks so much, aren't you going to discipline her a bit? You're going to let her jump up and down like a grasshopper. You don't find it annoying, but I do. I don't want to talk to her, so please make her shut up." Queen Zhao was actually left speechless. Pfft. A pretty and delicate girl about 18 or 19 years old abruptly laughed out loud. Immediately after, she attracted a slight glare from her lady mother, and the girl playfully stuck out her tongue before closing her small mouth. She then secretly winked in Arbor's direction. That's 8th sister Mou. She has a good temper. If you're bored, you can go find her to play. Mo Lien curled his lips as he whispered while tugging at Xiao Xiao's small hand. Consort Zhang's expression could no longer be described as ugly. A layer of dark clouds was smeared on her pretty face. Her eyes revealed a bit of viciousness as she coldly stared at this little slut who dared to speak nonsense and ruthlessly trample on her imperial concubine face. Very good. How many years had it been since someone had dared to speak to her in such a disrespectful tone? That slut who dared to provoke her imperial concubine had long been drowned at the bottom of the pond in the imperial garden and turned into a pile of mud. She couldn't be more dead. The crown princess, this little bitch, just because the crown prince doted on her, she dared to look down on her. She wanted her to regret coming to this world. Yunhee, you are glaring at our crown princess like this. Are you dissatisfied with her? The crown prince suddenly spoke in an icy tone. Consort Zhang's body immediately chilled, and she hurriedly retracted her gaze. She forced a smile and said, Your Highness, the crown prince must be joking. How could this concubine dare to be like this? After speaking, she rubbed her forehead and pretended to have a headache. She said delicately to Queen Zhao, Your Majesty the Queen, please forgive younger sister. Younger sister has a headache and will take her leave first. What a disrespectful concubine. Darling Qiao said with a cold expression, You just came to the banquet and already want to leave. Ha! Where are you putting Her Majesty the Queen's face? This completely threw Consort Zhang's words back at her. The imperial concubine was so angry that she fell backwards and was quickly supported by 2 palace maids. Everyone, Queen Zhao's mouth twitched fiercely as she solemnly sized up the little girl. Chapter 600. Consort Zhang's favor in the imperial harem had never declined. It could be said that she had covered half the sky with a single hand for so many years, but Queen Zhao had never seen her suffer such a setback in recent years. Now that she saw her trembling from anger after hearing a few words from the crown princess, Queen Zhao needed to take a good look at this daughter-in-law of hers. She was truly a capable person, although this child was young and appeared to be very aloof. She didn't seem to speak much, but unexpectedly, her venomous words could infuriate someone to death. Queen Zhao glanced at a certain person who was so angry that her chest was heaving up and down slightly. Her lower lip inwardly twitched, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Yunhee had been domineering for many years, and it was rare to meet a young lady who could infuriate her half to death with a single word. Needless to say, Queen Zhao was secretly pleased. Looking at Arbor's stoic little face, she found her somewhat pleasing to the eye. The young lady that her son liked was definitely extraordinary. Queen Zhao thought to herself, I'll just observe for now. Royal mother, then this son will take his leave first. I'll come back to pick up my crown princess in an hour. The crown prince held Arbor's small hand and even escorted her to her seat. Only then did he bow to the queen and take his leave. Queen Zhao really wanted to pick up the teacup next to her and throw it at his head. This stinky son, he really only gave her an hour to interact with him. After the crown prince finished bowing and exhorted his little wife, he flicked his sleeves and left. Naturally, he also took away the infatuated gazes of the numerous young ladies in Brilliant Sun Hall. Queen Zhao didn't know what to say. She felt that she had raised a son for nothing. Consort Zhang originally wanted to flick her sleeves and leave, but after the queen said, Younger sister, are you really not giving this consort face like the crown princess said? She could only grit her teeth and sit down next to Consort Zhang. Her handkerchief was twisted so tightly in her hand that it was almost about to be torn to shreds. Noble consort Jing, the crown prince consort is still young, and it looks like she has an innocent and unaffected temperament, so don't bicker with her. Consort Jing drank a mouthful of tea as she said this to noble consort Jing with a chuckle. Consort Jing didn't say anything, but there was a cold smile on her lips. On the other end, after Mu Qianqian was scolded, her mouth was already completely rotten. Madame Mu couldn't bear it and wiped her tears, but she didn't dare to take her daughter away at this time. She could only watch her daughter sit there with a rotten mouth, as if sitting on pins and needles, and accept the malicious sneers of the noble ladies around her. Mu Qianqian cast her resentful gaze at Arbor from time to time. Her entire heart was rather uncomfortable when she saw that lofty person sitting in the first seat below the queen. It was all because of that slut that the crown prince punished her in public, making her unable to raise her head in front of everyone. The mother and daughter of the Mu family's second branch didn't have it easy either. Their heads were drenched in soup, and they were only wiping them slightly, so their complexions weren't good right now. During this small banquet, the Mu family simply became the laughingstock in the eyes of all the noble ladies in the capital. Today's small banquet was held to let you all recognize the crown princess. The queen said dryly, "The crown princess mother, please step forward." Wei Ziqin stepped forward and performed a proper curtsy. "This subject greets your majesty." The queen casually praised the crown princess a couple of times insincerely and also bestowed many gifts to Wei Ziqin, giving the Qiao family enough face. Only then did she have her withdraw to continue eating. Consort Zheng's cold gaze roved over Wei Ziqin's face, but she feigned silence while holding her cup. At this time, a woman suddenly stood up and curtsied to the queen. "Today, I will write a reward for you guys. Let's see when the time comes." Chapter 601. This woman's cheeks were slightly protruding, and her face was extremely thin. Her eyes were sharp and spirited, and Arbor felt that she seemed to have swept an imperceptible glance at her face when she stood up. That gaze was displeasing. "Princess Anam, what do you have to say?" The queen's tone towards Wu Hongmo was rather amiable. "Your Majesty the Queen, my niece Wu Xiaosu has learned a new fan dance. It looks rather interesting, so I'll have her dance a song for your Majesty here to liven things up a bit." The queen nodded slightly. "Very good." The 18-year-old girl named Wu Xiaosu had probably made preparations early on. As soon as the queen nodded, she walked into the brilliant Sun Hall under the royal maid's guidance, dressed in a long pink dress with smoke and sand fluttering around her. She held her head high, her chest puffed out, and her chin raised proudly. "Greetings, Your Majesty the Queen." Wu Xiaosu and the group of girls greeted in unison. "Rise." "Wu Xiaosu. Is it the Wu family's eldest daughter?" the queen asked softly. Princess Anam nodded with a smile. Replying, "Your Majesty, it is indeed the Wu family's eldest daughter." This smile caused the vassal king consort of Nan's protruding cheekbones to deepen. Xiaosu has embarrassed herself. After the Wu estate's eldest miss, Wu Xiaosu, bowed again, she turned around and signaled the two dancers behind her with her eyes. Instantly, the melodious sound of a zither rang out, and Wu Xiaosu's body bent backward in a very exaggerated arc. Her waist was so soft that it could almost be snapped in half. Swish! A pink feather fan slid out from her sleeve, covering half of her face. The fan dance appeared extremely beautiful under the performance of 16 young and beautiful girls, and every movement could become a beautiful scene. The stoic face was expressionless as she poked at the food in front of her with her chopsticks. Then, she casually flipped through the food and quickly put down her chopsticks in disdain. The food had already cooled down, and it couldn't even compare to her family's Chiochio's small, warm, salt-free stew. It truly was very boring. To entertain so many guests, the food was naturally prepared by the imperial kitchen. On the way from the imperial kitchen to the central palace, although the food was packed in brocade boxes and padded with cotton wool, it was still a long journey. It would be strange if the dishes were not cold after being carried all the way here on such a snowy day. The little fellow had always been a picky eater and was unwilling to touch the cold food. How could her mother, Wei Ziqin, not know her daughter's delicate temperament? Looking at her daughter from afar, her eyes were slightly worried. "Crown Princess, let this servant add some fruit wine for you." A palace maid serving beside her lowered her head and took 2 steps closer. She held the white jade pot in her hand and added a fruity wine to Arbor's cup. This was a winter fruit that could grow in a world of ice and snow. It could be used to fill one's stomach when one was hungry. It was also good for brewing wine. The fruit's fragrance was very rich. The main reason was that this type of plant was very easy to grow, and the probability of mutation was not high. Therefore, in the inner city of the capital, the seeds of this type of fruit tree had been planted on a large scale in recent years to satisfy various needs. Of course, to the poor and starving commoners at the bottom, the price of something like the winter fruit was still very high. Arbor expressionlessly raised her wine cup and fanned it twice with her hand. As a fruity fragrance assailed her nostrils, Arbor's expression turned icy cold in a split second. With a flip of her wrist, the cup of top-notch fruit wine splashed onto the palace maid's face. Ah! Chapter 603. She was very patient, someone who knew how to do big things. She wanted to see if that person would continue to use this kind of slow-acting poison on her. Arbor tilted her head and looked at the queen, who had an ugly expression. "How is it? Are you sure that she wants to harm me?" The queen nodded. "Crown Princess, how do you want to deal with this person?" "Kill her." Arbor opened her mouth and spat out these 2 words without any scruples. The crowd of noble maidens looked at her with a bit of fear in their eyes. After a short period of interaction, they seemed to have detected 8 words from the crown princess: vicious, not to be trifled with. The vassal king consort of Nan said with a smile, "The crown prince consort is truly remarkable, knowing that it was poisoned by that royal maid just by smelling the scent of the fruit wine. Could it be that the crown prince consort also has some experience in using poison?" Arbor glanced at her innocently. "That's not the case." "Oh. What do you mean?" Princess Anam asked with a smile. "If the crown princess hit the nail on the head, then her luck is really too good. This person's actions are sneaky." Her hand kept trembling when she was pouring the wine. "I poured the wine to test her, but I didn't expect that she really poisoned it. I just don't know if the other wine cups were poisoned as well." Everyone looked at the palace maid who was pouring the wine with a face full of horror. Some of them even covered their throats and turned around to cough with all their might, as if they wanted to vomit out the wine that had just entered their stomachs. "Imperial Physician Chow, take a look at the wine of the other madams and misses." How could the queen not understand the horror in these people's eyes? The old imperial physician nodded and went forward. After checking the wine cups one by one, he shook his head and said, "The other wine cups are all non-toxic." The queen nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. The seriousness in her eyes deepened a little. Then this poisoning of the wine was clearly targeted at the crown princess. For such a thing to happen in her brilliant son palace hall, wasn't this deliberately causing a trace of discord between her and her son? Wasn't this deliberately causing her to feel uncomfortable in her heart? "Crown Princess, this queen will definitely uphold justice for you in this matter and give you an explanation," the queen said in a low voice. Arbor nodded expressionlessly. She didn't expect the queen to be able to find out anything. In any case, poisoning her was just like scratching an itch for her. They could use soldiers to block water to block of water. At this moment, the palace maid who was tossing and turning onto the floor was to toss and turn to slowly breathe. To prevent the queens to prevent a change to burn to the night. The queen to the crown princess. To the queen to be to be to mend. Moreover, the queen was still a bit worried. Would this crown princess be so petty as to think that she was the one behind this poisoning? However, she couldn't see any expression from that expressionless face, so there was no way to know her true thoughts. The queen was extremely gloomy. She felt so stifled just looking at her perfectly expressionless daughter-in-law. Consort Ching had so many daughters-in-law, and which one of them wasn't gentle to their husbands and mothers-in-law? No matter how she looked at her daughter-in-law, she didn't have any expression. Just looking at her made her a bit angry. The small banquet ended abruptly. Before Consort Ching was helped away by the servants, she coldly swept a glance at Arbor from the corner of her eyes. She gracefully walked out of the Brilliant Sun Palace's main entrance in a pair of embroidered shoes. Not done yet. Chapter 604. The moment Arbor walked out of the Brilliant Sun Hall, she was pounced on by a chirping Shaolin. Sister, are you coming home with us today? Jolin asked with a grin. Your sister can't go back today. Arbor was just about to agree when she was interrupted by that hateful voice. She turned to glare at him. The crown prince quickly walked over and naturally reached out to hold her little hand. He turned to smile at Wei Ziqin. Mother. Jojo still has to stay here for a few more days. Tomorrow, Lord Father will summon her, so there's no need to go through so much trouble. Mother, don't worry, I'll take good care of Jojo. This shameless person who was acting all familiar with her even called her mother in front of all the noble ladies who had yet to leave. Wei Ziqin was stunned, then she covered her mouth and laughed. After laughing, Wei Ziqin pulled her daughter's little hand. Crown Prince, I'll leave after having a few intimate words with Jojo. Okay, I'll wait here for Jojo. The Crown Prince smiled and nodded. Wei Ziqin pulled Arbor a little further away and walked under the eaves of the corridor. She whispered, Daughter, you'll be of marriageable age in 3 months, so you're still young. Don't do anything out of line that will make mother worried, okay? With Arbor's clever mind, she understood what her mother wanted to say when she heard her mother's hemming and hawing. Her little face inexplicably reddened. Mother, what are you talking about? He's been sleeping alone in the side chamber for the past 2 days. Wei Ziqin beamed and nodded. She couldn't help but praise her son-in-law. I knew that Xiao Mo is a very sensible child. He has a good character and a good temperament. He's also handsome. Mother really didn't misjudge him. You two are a match made in heaven. Ha ha ha. Mother, please stop praising. I'm your biological daughter, aren't I? Good daughter, your performance in the main hall today was also. You should be more careful in the future. After all, she's the great king's imperial concubine. We still have to give her some face. Arbor snorted. Those people aren't qualified for me to be careful. After saying that, he glanced at his mother's eager expression and couldn't help but nod helplessly. I know. In short, if others don't come to provoke me, I won't take the initiative to provoke others. You lass. Alright, mother just wants to say a few words to you. I'll leave the palace with your younger sister first. Remember to come back in 2 days. It's not good for your reputation if you always live together before you get married. You should take it easy. After all, gossip is a fearful thing. Arbor nodded. Mom, I'll come back early. I miss your cooking. Silly girl. Whenever you come back, mother will cook for you. There's no need to worry that you won't have something to eat. Wei Ziqin chuckled happily, her eyes filled with deep love. Sister, when you come back with brother-in-law, remember to take a detour to the Wang sesame seed shop and bring me a. Woo-woo, mother, why are you covering my mouth? Bring a Wang sesame seed shop. Woo-woo. The little foodie was dragged away by Wei Ziqin with her mouth covered. Arbor sat in the carriage and couldn't help but purse her lips and want to laugh. She had been so busy since she came back that she forgot to prepare some snacks for her foodie sister. She must prepare some delicious food for her in 2 days. Also, she didn't see Brother Xiaohu last time. She wondered if he had come out of seclusion. The Crown Prince was bursting with joy as he looked in the direction the little foodie left. He smiled and turned to Arbor. Sister is really clever. As expected, her personality is like you, innocent, lively, and interesting. When we go back in 2 days, we'll bring her a few more sesame seed cakes. 2 stacks won't be a problem. Chapter 605. Arbor didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he glanced at him. Do you think my sister is a pig? Hui Feng really wanted to ridicule him. Your Highness, are you blind? How is your stoic-faced wife lively and interesting? Can she be lively? During the journey, the Crown Prince reached out to hold Arbor's small hand. Jojo, Imperial Mother definitely didn't have someone pour that poisoned wine. You have to believe me. Arbor glanced at him and gave him a, "Do you think I'm an idiot?" look. The Crown Prince chuckled foolishly and nodded repeatedly. I knew my Jojo is very smart, one of a kind in the world. I'll definitely investigate this matter thoroughly. This person dared to poison you in front of everyone, so they must have bribed that royal maid by your side. And there aren't many people who can bribe my Imperial Mother's palace. It's such a rare poison. I sprinkled that powder into the wine cup, Arbor indifferently said. Xiao Mu explained dryly, I sprinkled a pinch of incomparably toxic poison powder so that the poison would spread and fester upon contact with her skin. The Crown Prince. As expected, my wife isn't ordinary. Huifeng's mouth twitched. The Crown Princess is so savage. What should I do? She previously gave me a slow-acting poison. 3 months later, I might have unknowingly kicked my legs and died. Arbor's indifferent voice caused the Crown Prince's eyes to surge with fury. I'm just curious. Will this person still send someone to infiltrate my side and continue to poison me? He really was very curious. Darling, what do you plan to do? I'll cooperate fully. Tell me. Hui Feng. Your Highness, hurry and pick up your moral integrity that's all over the floor. Where did my wise and mighty Highness who's praised by tens of thousands of people go? I plan to beat them at their own game and wait for that person to infiltrate my side. I'll secretly switch all of that person's poison onto himself. The Crown Prince reached out to lift her onto his lap and nodded repeatedly. Jojo, you're so awesome. Hui Feng. Your Majesty Crown Princess, are you sure it's not because you're lazy and don't want to investigate, so you're saying things like, waiting for rabbits to appear? By the way, I remember someone said last night that he would tell me a big joke when he comes back from the morning assembly. Arbor pursed his lips. The Crown Prince immediately understood and laughed in a low voice. Last night, I heard that Second Imperial Brother's residence was robbed. The whole night was chaotic. Second Imperial Brother fell down while trying to catch the thief, and his elbow was broken. Arbor pursed his lips. But today, when I saw his mother, Lu Fei, she was still smiling as if nothing had happened. How can he still laugh when his son is in such a sorry state? Hui Feng. Her Highness the Crown Princess's choice of words feels a bit strange. The more interesting thing is tonight. Yesterday was just a warm-up. Did he think that he would be able to sleep peacefully today? Humph. The Crown Prince whispered a few words into her ear. Arbor's eyes suddenly widened, and she turned to look at the Crown Prince. What a fraud. Who could be his match? Jojo, isn't it funny? Mo Lien was all smiles as he hugged his little wife and shook her. Smile for me. Arbor turned her little head and faced him with the back of her head. Mo Lien chuckled softly. Just as he was about to turn the little fellow's head back, he saw a black shadow suddenly land next to the carriage and anxiously say, Your Highness, Madame Chiao and Second Miss were attacked at Dongshan Gate. Our men are already doing their best to fend them off, so they're fine for now. What? Arbor was alarmed, and the Crown Prince's expression also turned solemn. Chapter 606. The two of them were no longer in the mood to enjoy the snowy night along the way. They both jumped off the carriage and rushed towards Dongshan Gate at an extremely fast speed. Today, all the carriages of the noblewomen and noble ladies were arranged to pass through Dongshan Gate. Because Wei Ziqin spoke a few more words with her family's daughter, she came out a little later. The carriage followed Dongshan Gate's path, and there weren't many people under the decorated archway. As the snowflakes became heavier, the Wu family's carriage could be seen carrying their eldest young miss, Wu Xiaosu, slowly moving forward. Wu Xiaosu had the coachman deliberately slow down, waiting for Wei Ziqin's carriage to come up. Madame Chiao. Eldest young Miss Wu unhurriedly lifted the curtain and poked her head out to softly call out. Wei Ziqin also lifted a corner of the curtain and looked at eldest young Miss Wu. She nodded and said, Young Miss Wu, what's the matter? Madame Chiao, I'm really sorry. There seems to be a problem with my carriage's wheels. I wonder if you could give me a ride. Wei Ziqin glanced sideways and saw that the rear wheels of Wu Xiaosu's carriage were indeed a little crooked, as if they wouldn't be able to support a long journey. Young Miss Wu, we don't seem to be going the same way. Shaolin poked her head out and grinned at Wu Xiaosu. I see that your wheels are only a little crooked, so they should be able to run for a while. Your home isn't far from Dongshan Gate, so you should be able to hold on. Unlike us, we still have to go around to the North Gate. If we had to take another detour to give you a ride, my mother and I don't know how long it would take to reach home. The implication was that since young Miss Wu was so considerate, she shouldn't be so tactless as to do something so overboard. Wu Xiaosu didn't expect that this little girl's mouth would be so sharp, wanting to send her off with just a few words. Her face stiffened slightly, looking a little unsightly. That coachman jumped off the carriage at the right time and bowed to Wei Ziqin, saying, Madame Chiao, I originally didn't want to trouble you. But from this old servant's many years of experience driving carriages, these wheels really won't be able to hold on for long. Right now, it's freezing outside. If the wheels break and can't run, then our young miss will have to endure the entire night in the snow. Madam, please be so kind as to give our young lady a ride. This old servant is familiar with the roads in this area and can point out a shortcut for Madam. I beg for Madam's help. Wei Ziqin was a kind-hearted person and was about to open her mouth to agree. Shaolin exclaimed from the other end, Aya. Her small face suddenly squeezed together and cold sweat dripped down from her head. She began to display her extraordinary acting skills. What's wrong? What's wrong? Wei Ziqin was surprised. The maidservant Chunying also asked anxiously, Second Miss, what's wrong? Where does it hurt, Second Miss? My stomach hurts. Mother. My stomach hurts so much. Shaolin let out a trembling groan, and her entire body began to tremble. Lin Don't scare your mother. Everything was fine just now. Why is your stomach hurting now? Mother, it must be the cold wind that blew in and froze me. Mother, let's go home quickly. My stomach hurts so much that I'm about to die. Don't speak nonsense. Wei Ziqin patted the back of her daughter's hand, feeling sorry for her. She hastily stuck her head out and said to the coachman, "Hurry, hurry back to the residence." "Yes, madam." Of course, the Qiao family's coachman wasn't happy that they had to take a detour in such a snowy day. Now that he heard his wife's order, he whipped the horse and made a prompt decision to drive the carriage away. Chapter 607. Wu Xiaosu glared at the Qiao family's carriage with a fiery glare. With a bang, she slammed the carriage frame and angrily reprimanded, "Slut. The older one is so slutty, and the younger one is also slutty. Miss, what should we do now? If we can't get on the Qiao family's carriage, then we can't." Wu Xiaosu's personal maidservant stuttered. Wu Xiaosu slapped her across the face, causing her to cry out in alarm. She covered her face and hung her head, tears about to roll down her cheeks. "You're asking me what to do. What's the use of raising you bunch of trash? It's fine if you don't know how to come up with ideas, but now you're asking me what to do." The personal maidservant knelt down in the carriage with tears in her eyes, repeatedly kowtowing and begging for mercy. The Qiao family's carriage was already far away at this time, turning left after exiting Dongshan Gate. Wei Ziqin poked her daughter's forehead in annoyance and amusement. "Stop pretending." This act came as she wished, and she could even force herself to break out in a cold sweat. How could this younger daughter be so talented? Xiao Lin stuck out her tongue and revealed a sweet smile. She held her mother's arm and said, "Mother, the weather is so cold, and it didn't break down earlier or later. It just had to wait until we arrived before her carriage broke down. If that Miss Wu said she didn't have any other plans, I don't believe it. We shouldn't have the heart to harm others, but we must be vigilant against others. Elder sister also said that we shouldn't be overly kind. We have to be clear-eyed and clear-minded, and think more about everything." "You." Wei Ziqin couldn't help but find it funny. These two daughters were both mischievous. The older one had a cold face and didn't speak much, but her thoughts were more meticulous than anyone else's. The younger one looked carefree and simple-minded on the surface, but in reality, her heart wasn't coarse, and her mind was very active. "Heh, mother. I just feel that Miss Wu doesn't seem like a kind person. Let's not pay too much attention to her." Wei Ziqin glanced at her and sighed. "My daughter has grown up and has more ideas. Mother can't control her anymore." Xiao Lin giggled and hugged her mother's arm affectionately. "What are you saying, mother? Your daughter is very obedient." While the mother and daughter were chatting affectionately, a sword light suddenly flew over and chopped down on the carriage, instantly chopping off one of the shafts with a clanked sound. The coachman couldn't control himself and rolled down from his position. Before he could make a sound, his head was chopped off by a flash of light in front of him. The mother and daughter duo grabbed Chunying and flew out of the broken carriage. The carriage that had fallen to the ground was instantly pierced by arrows like a hornet's nest. Chunying was extremely shocked. After landing on the ground, she hurriedly shouted, "Madam, second miss, quickly leave. Don't worry about this servant." More than a dozen adult men dressed in night clothes surrounded the mother and daughter duo. Their auras were very powerful. The moment they attacked, they fiercely attacked the two of them. "Chunying, step back." Xiao Lin's eyes darkened. At this moment, a sharp glint faintly bloomed in the eyes of the 11-year-old girl. Wei Ziqin waved her sleeve to block one person's attack, and she looked at the newcomers with a slightly dark expression. "Who are you? You actually dare to attack an imperial court's madam in front of Dongshan Gate? Do you not want to live? The dozen or so night walkers didn't say anything. They only surrounded Wei Ziqin and her daughter and launched attacks without any regard for their lives. Among these dozen or so people, one of them was a level 9 mystic cultivator with extremely vigorous mystic energy. Wei Ziqin, a mere level 3 mystic cultivator, and Qiao Lin, a level 4 mystic cultivator, naturally weren't his match. Chapter 608. As the attacks gradually intensified, the night pervaded. Two agile young men in black suddenly jumped into the encirclement. Accompanied by two tiger roars, two enormous mystic beasts pounced forward and bit the palms of the two night walkers, doing their best to tear them apart. The night walkers merely grunted and didn't make any sound. Madam Qiao, hold on. We've already sent people to inform the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Don't panic. The young man who spoke blocked in front of Wei Ziqin with his sword, completely blocking a level 5 mystic cultivator's attack. Among these people, apart from that level 9 mystic cultivator, most of the others only had level 5 or level 6 cultivation, and half of them were body cultivators around the 6th layer. It was naturally more than enough to deal with Wei Ziqin and her daughter's level 3 and level 4 cultivation, but it was completely insufficient in front of a level 10 mystic cultivator. Those two young men led their mystic beasts and quickly cleared a path out of the encirclement. They protected the mother and daughter pair and were about to charge out of the encirclement. Suddenly, their bodies tensed up as if they sensed something, and they abruptly looked up. That level 9 mystic cultivator took out two white beads the size of pellets from his bosom. With a cold snort, he abruptly flicked them at the two young mystic cultivators. Madam Qiao. Second miss, quickly move aside. The two young men each grabbed one of the mother and daughter pair and scattered to the left and right. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the level 11 mystic energy beads explosions tore apart the silent night and alarmed nearly half of the capital's citizens. Because the two young men wanted to protect Wei Ziqin and her daughter, their internal organs were impacted by the mystic energy beads explosions. They coughed several times, and blood flowed out of the corners of their mouths at almost the same time. The level 9 mystic cultivator's ghostly figure appeared in front of one of them and struck that young man's back with his palm. Taking advantage of the young man flying out, the level 9 mystic cultivator seized Wei Ziqin from his hands and struck the back of her neck, causing her to faint. Mother! Qiao Lin tightly clenched her fists with reddened eyes. The level 9 mystic cultivator suddenly raised his sleeve and shot an arrow in her direction. That sleeve arrow swiftly arrived in front of Qiao Lin in the blink of an eye. The level 10 mystic cultivator youth's expression chilled, and he swiftly raised his hand to control that sleeve arrow with mystic energy, causing it to explode in front of his eyes with a bang. Then, his expression changed slightly as he cursed in his heart. The sleeve arrow was smeared with poisonous powder. After such an explosion, the wind blew and scattered the powder, causing his body to tremble slightly. The two mystical beasts were just about to pounce forward and bite him, but because they had inhaled a mouthful of poison powder, their forehooves slipped and they suddenly fell to the ground. The level 9 mystic cultivator saw an opportunity and swiftly scuttled to this level 10 mystic cultivator youth's side. He struck the youth's chest with his palm again, and his firm fingers grabbed Qiao Lin's pulse and exerted force. Jolin furrowed his brows in pain. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as his body fell limply to the ground. The remaining 7 or 8 night walkers swarmed forward in a well-trained manner. They separated the unconscious mother and daughter and carried them into 2 prepared carriages. Baetan, who was driving the carriages, berated twice before driving the carriages to the left and right to separate the mother and daughter and take them away. When the Crown Prince and Crown Princess rushed over, they saw the 2 carriages separating left and right as fast as lightning, and their hearts instantly skipped a beat. Your Highness! Two black-clothed youths scrambled up from the ground and stumbled as they ran to them. They separately escaped to Huabei Gate and Jinan Gate. Chapter 609. Mo Lien and Arbor looked at each other, nodded in tacit understanding, and then split up to chase after the carriage. The dozen or so hidden guards whistled and followed closely behind Arbor. Arbor's eyes were already burning with raging flames. Today, she was going to announce to the world that whoever dared to capture her family and hurt them, she would make them die a horrible death and regret coming to this world. The carriage sped forward, and the coachman looked back from time to time. Arbor's face was cold as she took out a speed talisman and placed it on herself. At the same time, Arbor was like a flash of lightning as she sped forward. The coachman shouted, and the carriage quickly turned a corner on the city street. Arbor wasn't willing to give up. She tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and jumped onto the roof. She could only hear the wind blowing past her ears. Her speed was so fast that she left behind an illusory white shadow. Whoosh whoosh. After a few leaps, Xiao Mu jumped down from the white eaves covered in a thick layer of snow. A harsh glint flashed through her eyes. She spread her fingers and the water instantly condensed into ice crystals. She raised her hand and hundreds of ice crystals shot out. Like snow, rain, ice, and wind, they instantly shattered the carriage into pieces. The coachman's eyes were filled with a trace of panic and surprise. His hands didn't stop moving as he held the reins and urged the horse to run. However, Arbor saw clearly that her mother and sister weren't in the carriage. "You're courting death." Xiao Mu's eyes burst out with a cold glint, and she leaped up. Mystic energy enveloped her body as she struck down a critical strike with a bang. The shaft of the carriage collapsed at the same time, and the three people in the carriage were about to jump up and escape. Arbor's dagger was like a bolt of lightning as it slashed across the coachman's neck. A round head rolled under the wheel of the carriage, but the horse still continued to charge forward due to inertia. After the three body-securing talismans were cast, the body cultivators stiffened their bodies and assumed a posture that suggested they were about to get up and flee. "Speak. Where are the people in the carriage?" Xiao Mu slapped one of them, and the wind from her palm swept across one of their faces. "If you don't tell me, I'll make you beg for death." Arbor's 5 fingers ruthlessly pierced into the man's shoulder, his cold eyes staring straight at the man. Ah! That body cultivator's body was rather sturdy, but he didn't expect his bones to be crushed by the girl's grasp. Arbor didn't have the time to listen to his screams. He grabbed him by the neck and raised a dictum talisman in his hand. "Let me tell you. If you don't tell me the truth. Wait until I use the dictum talisman and ask for the whereabouts of your family. I will bury them in the rivers, lakes, and seas, and grind their bones to dust. Die without a burial ground." That person's pupils shrank. The light in his eyes was as if he was looking at a fiend. "Speak." Inserting the dictum talisman would take some time. What she lacked the most now was time. She needed to know the whereabouts of her mother and sister. Now was the time. She couldn't wait another second. I'll talk." That level 9 mystic cultivator carried second Miss Chow away when he was making a detour just now. Crack. That person's gaze turned sluggish. His neck tilted slightly, and his entire head drooped down due to his broken neck. Crack, crack. After 2 consecutive sounds of bones breaking, the other 2 body cultivators also died on the spot. Xiao Mu promptly summoned Qingyuan and jumped onto its back. She then spread out her spiritual conscience and shouted while pointing to the left, "There." Chapter 610. With a shrill cry, Qingyuan spread its wings with a whoosh and fiercely chased in the direction Arbor had pointed out. Qinghuan's speed had already reached its peak. Arbor's stoic face had already been completely replaced by a frosty expression. Looking at her with eyes that froze 3,000 feet of ice, it was as if they had returned to that night several years ago, terrifyingly desolate and silent. She wanted killed people. She wanted to skin them alive and kill them without a doubt. Shriek. Qinghuan swooped down from the sky, already locking onto a running target. That person was carrying Shaolin and dashing at an extremely fast speed. Their goal seemed to be to leave Jinan Gate and head towards Shiluo Street. Shiluo Street housed many commoners who had fled to the capital from outside the city. It could be said that it was the most crowded place in the entire capital. Most of the commoners didn't have houses. Instead, they set up piles of tents outside their houses. Those who could afford to live in houses on Shiluo Street were usually mystic cultivators or body cultivators. If this guy ran into Shiluo Street with his little sister and blended into the pile of tents, it would be troublesome to find them. Arbor hooked his lips in a sneer. He had already stood up from Qinghuan's back and jumped down, slapping the immobilization talisman in his hand towards that person's back. However, once the immobilization talisman was activated, that person's body actually only swayed slightly before immediately continuing to run forward with nimble movements. She was about to cross Shiluo Street's decorated archway and enter the tent area. Arbor's gaze hardened as he used his spiritual conscience to launch a swift and violent mental attack. Although she had yet to enter the spiritual realm, her mystic conscience had already advanced to spiritual conscience. The range of her spiritual conscience application was much wider than her mystic conscience. Not only could she infiltrate other people's inner worlds and clearly see their mystic veins, she could even launch an invisible attack. Under her spiritual conscious identification, the other party's cultivation was already clear as day. So it's a level 12 mystic cultivator who used an aura-concealing talisman to disguise herself as a level 9 mystic cultivator. Arbor snorted coldly. His spiritual conscience had already infiltrated the other party's conscience and inflicted a lacerating injury. Ah! That mystic cultivator clearly didn't expect Arbor to have such a method. His conscience felt as if it had been ruthlessly struck by someone, and it almost started to shatter from the root. This made him flustered, and his grip loosened, causing Shaolin to fall to the ground. Xiao Mu's figure abruptly shot up and flitted past her younger sister. She directly tossed her backwards, directly throwing her to the several hidden guards that had followed closely behind her. Don't interfere. Arbor stretched out his 5 fingers and shook them behind him. His eyes were filled with severity as he coldly gazed at the level 12 mystic cultivator in front of him. Such a beautiful snowy night, let's not disturb the commoners of Shiluo Street. Life isn't easy. Don't cause trouble for others. After saying this, she actually pulled out an extremely thin vine from her sleeve and coldly looked at that mystic cultivator. Since I can't use a dictum talisman on you, then forget it. I'll use some other methods to make you speak. That person couldn't help but let out a snort of laughter. Little girl, you're quite arrogant. Unfortunately, I don't know if you'll have the life to return to your Eastern Palace alive. Is that so? Arbor's lips curled into a meaningful sneer. She abruptly swung the vine in the direction of the level 12 mystic cultivator, aiming straight for his face. At the same time, Arbor used another spiritual conscious attack. Chapter 6:11. Under the impact of Arbor's spiritual sense, the level 12 mystic cultivator's conscience rapidly crumbled. His head throbbed with pain, and he was about to topple to the ground. His gaze was horrified, and he inwardly cursed. His fingers had already fished out 2 mystic energy beads from his inner world. Would Arbor give him the chance to use the mystic energy beads? The vine twined around the level 12 mystic cultivator's wrist like a living creature. It didn't seem to exert much force, but a crisp crack was heard. That level 12 mystic cultivator's pupils contracted, and he simply looked down at his wrist that had been snapped by the vine in disbelief. How? How was this possible? How could a thin and soft vine break his wrist in a matter of seconds? Was this still the body of a level 12 mystic cultivator? The 2 mystic energy beads were nimbly swallowed by the vine and completely turned into nourishment for Cho-Cho. This level 12 mystic cultivator would never have imagined that this vine was actually a clone of the sapling Cho-Cho. It possessed a portion of the sapling's strength, so it was more than enough to deal with this level 12 mystic cultivator. Slap! The vine once again pressed forward and whipped that level 12 mystic cultivator's face. He could even hear the crisp sound of his cheekbone cracking. It seemed like his cheekbone had completely shattered. No! He tried his best to regulate his chaotic breathing and pacify his unbearably painful conscience. But Arbor wouldn't give him time to catch his breath. The vine whipped the level 12 mystic cultivator's limbs and face more than a dozen times in a row. The last hit directly sent that person's eyeball flying out of its socket. Arbor's lips curled into a mocking smile. Now, do you still think that I can't return to the Eastern Palace? The hidden guards shrunk their necks in their hiding places. Heavens! The Crown Princess's methods were far from what ordinary people could compare to. Perhaps she normally didn't care much about others, but once she was truly angered, her methods would absolutely be dangerous and severe. Dictum Talisman. Arbor didn't waste words with him and directly threw a Dictum Talisman at him. The Dictum Talisman could be said to be ineffective against people with higher cultivation than her. But now, the person in front of him had already been beaten like a dog, and his conscience was almost shattered. His current cultivation could no longer be considered to be at level 12. Arbor wanted to test the effect of the Dictum Talisman. After waiting for almost a minute, her brows furrowed slightly. Just when he thought that the Dictum Talisman couldn't escape from the laws and was destined to lose its effect, Meng Chao suddenly realized something. A faint light suddenly flitted across the miserable level 12 mystic cultivator's glabella. Success! Arbor raised his eyebrows and went straight to the point. Who sent you to kidnap Madame Chiao and second Miss Chiao? Cough, cough, cough. The level 12 mystic cultivator coughed heavily on the ground and said hoarsely, yes, yes. He was under the effect of the Dictum Talisman, so he couldn't help but tell the person who had contacted him in detail. A bone-chilling coldness flashed through Arbor's eyes. She held the vine in one hand and picked up the panting level 12 mystic cultivator like a gunny sack with the other. She stood up and leaped down, heading toward the location he spoke of. The hidden guards behind her looked at each other and cried out in alarm before hastily running after her. As for her mother's side, Mo Lien definitely wouldn't have any problems handling it, so she wasn't in a hurry to find Crown Prince Mo. She merely picked up this person with a sneer on her lips as she dashed madly towards her target. Chapter 614. 2 Jia Yuans lived in each of the east and west rooms of the Classics Reverence Chamber. Born in the Marquis Yanwei estate, Jia Yulu had always been plagued with illness. She basically spent most of the year recuperating in the east room of the Classics Reverence Chamber, so she rarely participated in banquets. As for Jia Yu Huang, it was said that she was outstanding in singing and dancing when she was young. Otherwise, she wouldn't have received the great king's favor and been conferred the title of Jia Yu as a mere county magistrate's daughter. However, as she grew older in recent years, the number of beauties by the great king's side also increased, so she slowly received the cold shoulder. When Arbor first heard the level 12 mystic cultivator mention the Classics Reverence Chamber's old nanny, she didn't have the slightest impression of her. She was also baffled when Jiayu Huang was mentioned. She had never interacted with this Jiayu before, nor did she have any enmity with her. Was her brain damaged to kidnap her mother and younger sister at Dongshan Gate? She absolutely didn't believe that there was no one behind this. Going to the classics reverence chamber to find Jiayu Huang was one reason, and forcing the instigator out of her mouth was another. She only had these two objectives. She still wanted to escape unscathed after touching her mother and younger sister? That was truly too naive. It was already 10 minutes into the night. The two masters of the classics reverence chamber had also washed up and planned to go to bed. But at this time, a loud noise came from the west room's roof. The sound of falling tiles and bricks instantly broke the silence of the night. Jiayu, who had just laid down on the bed, quivered and abruptly sat up. For some reason, ever since she accepted the work arranged by Her Highness the Noble Consort, her heart had been in turmoil, and her eyelids hadn't stopped twitching the entire night. At this time, hearing the loud noise from the eaves, she was somewhat stupefied and hastily shouted toward the outer courtyard, someone quickly come. Go and see what happened. Bang! A ball-shaped person was kicked in from outside and rolled several times on the ground. Her head hit the wooden clothes rack in the bedroom and she cried out in pain. Her eyes rolled back, and she was about to faint. Who dares to trespass into this Jiayu's bedroom? Jiayu Huang put on a brave front and climbed down from the bed. She angrily shouted, her eyes wide open. Dong! Accompanied by a muffled groan, a heavy object fell to the ground. Arbor's small face slowly emerged from the dim light. His cold eyes fell on beautiful Huang, who was only wearing a white undergarment. Do you still recognize this person? She kicked the level 12 mystic cultivator who was groaning softly on the ground. The level 12 mystic cultivator exerted a bit of strength on his toes and flipped his face in front of pure Huang, revealing his ghastly pale true appearance to her. Jiayu Huang exclaimed and took a step back, trembling. There was no doubt that she had accepted it. Qiao Mu was immediately angered to the point of laughter, and she coldly ordered, "Smash this ghastly place that harbors filth for me." Screech! Qinghuan circled in the sky and abruptly swooped down after receiving its little master's order. A mouthful of icicles sprayed down from the west wing's eaves, instantly slicing off half of the eaves. Boom! The earth-shattering noise completely alarmed the royal guards patrolling outside the high walls. However, because they didn't have a transfer order, the captain of the royal guards didn't have the authority to set foot in the harem for the time being. He could only lead a team of people to watch from the other side of the wall and look at each other in dismay. That noise just now was truly too loud. It seemed to have come from the classics reverence chamber. However, Chapter 6:15. Following that, 5 to 6 consecutive explosions alarmed the entire capital from top to bottom. At this moment, the old king was currently reprimanding his second son in the royal study through the night with a dark expression. The second prince knelt at the old king's feet and sang a wonderful song to express his loyalty to his royal father and the entire Mo kingdom. He was just short of vomiting blood to act it out. Suddenly, he was alarmed by the loud explosions. The great king immediately jumped up from his seat and shouted angrily, "What's going on?" Great king! The steward eunuch, Gong Chang'an, rolled in from the outside. His face was pale as he anxiously said, Great king, it's not good. I don't know how pure Huang provoked the crown princess, but the crown princess brought such a huge mystical bird into the reverend cannon hall in the middle of the night. Right now, she's angrily smashing pure Huang's reverend cannon hall. What? The great king immediately jumped up from the ground. With his hands behind his back and a solemn expression, he angrily rebuked, Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Hurry and pass down my orders. Mobilize the royal guards to the Reverend Cannon Hall and stop the Crown Princess from causing trouble. Father, father. The second prince felt that he hadn't finished his performance yet, but he saw his father leave with a solemn expression. How could this be? He had to make things clear today. Otherwise, who knew what kind of changes would happen tomorrow? Scram! The great king was furious. He directly threw a stack of letters at the second prince's face. These letters were all personally written by you. How could there be a mistake? You greedy, stupid thing. From today onwards, you'd better reflect on your actions in the second prince's residence. Until you admit your mistakes. From today onwards, the second prince's residence will be cut off for 3 months. The great king angrily rebuked and strode out the door. The second prince was left paralyzed on the ground. He didn't even know how he left his father's study in a daze. On the other side, Pure Lu was also alarmed. She sent someone to take a look and returned to report that the crown princess had come knocking. Pure Lu was dumbfounded. She didn't attend the palace banquet today, so she didn't have the chance to see the crown princess. Just as she was about to get up and take a look, the old nanny beside her hurriedly dissuaded her. Pure Lu, it's better if you don't go. There's a fierce fight outside right now. If you go, what if you bump into something? Wouldn't you be implicated for no reason? That Huang Jiayu was usually arrogant and didn't put anyone in her eyes. She deserved it. Humph, just let the crown prince consort teach her a lesson so that she won't think that she's the only one in this palace apart from the noble consort. Nanny Zhang, ahem. Jiayu Lu coughed again. Hurry and close the doors and windows. Nanny Zhang anxiously shouted and hastily helped Pure Lu lie down. Pure Lu, listen to this old one. It's better if you don't go. It's cold and windy outside. Hurry and don't get involved in this muddy water. At this time, Pure Lu trembled in fear as if she had just been fished out of water. Her eyes were fixed on the crown princess' foot as she crushed the level 12 mystic cultivator. The crown princess was like a monster descending upon the world. Separated by the flickering candlelight, she crushed the level 12 mystic cultivator's spine inch by inch. If you don't speak, you'll be the same as this person. Your Highness the Crown Princess, spare my life. Pure Lu knelt with a plop. All of this was ordered by Her Highness the Noble Consort. I, a tiny Pure Lu, didn't dare to disobey. Bring me there. Arbor shouted angrily and directly picked up the trembling Pure Lu. With a whoosh, he left the Classics Reverence Hall and headed straight for the noble consort Sephora Flower Palace. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.